2024 meeting of the Lake Bluff Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals. If we could have a call to order, roll call, please.
Yes. The Village of Lake Bluff's Joint Plan Commission and Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for Wednesday, February 21st is called to order, and we'll start with the roll call vote. Member Danley?
Here.
Member Fisher? Here. Member Miller appears to be absent. Member Russell?
Here.
Member Sorensen is absent. Member Toll?
Here.
And Chair Peters.
Here. Thank you.
All right, we have a quorum.
Agenda item number 2 is our non-agenda items and visitors' public comment time. We allocate 15 minutes at the beginning of each meeting for any individual who wishes to address the committee on a matter that's not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that wishes to approach, or anybody virtually? Hearing none, seeing none. Agenda item number 3, consideration of the January 17, 2023 regular meeting minutes. Any proposed revisions or other changes?
Did note a couple typos that I sent.
Yes, and those have been fixed.
Okay.
Nothing substantive beyond that.
Hearing no material changes, is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, are all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And I'll abstain since I was not present at the last meeting.
Okay. Agenda item number 4, Ms. Gable, if you could provide us with an overview, please.
Yes. The new owner of 1776 Shore Acres recently submitted a variation application so that he could demolish the existing structures and construct 2 homes on the property at 1776 Shore Acres. Village staff identified that not only would the owner need variations, but also approval of a re-subdivision of the property into 2 lots. Prior to preparing the full applications, village staff suggested he come before the PCZBA for an informal review. The property at 1776 Shore Acres is approximately 108,000 square feet in size and contains 2 residences and a few accessory structures. Based on the plat of survey, the property appears to consist of 2 parcels, one containing the smaller residence in the northeast quadrant of the lot and one containing the remaining portion of the lot, which includes the second residence. However, the only subdivision of record for the property was from the 1920s and created only 1 lot of record. The new owner of 1776 Shore Acres also owns 1765 Shore Acres, both of which are undersized. Further, while the parcels are separated by a road, that road is private, so the parcels are actually considered to be adjoining lots. As such, 1 residence would be allowed on the parcels owned by the property owner. So as this is an informal review, the PCCBA can provide high-level feedback on these requests, and the property owner and his architect are in attendance.
Thank you. No reason to swear anybody in, it's not a hearing.
No, not needed.
Who would like to present? If you could state your name for the record and...
Good evening. I'm Healy Rice. I'm the architect for the project, and I'm here with the homeowner, John O'Donnell. Claire, do you want to do the PowerPoint?
Yeah,
or just,
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
You can read this, but just as a point of context, Claire and I spoke with regard to the existing house that John owns at 1765, and we were just made aware that because the Shore Acres is a private road and the 2 properties actually touch, that gets kind of folded into this as well. When John bought 1765 2 years ago, That was, the intention was to renovate and live in that home, which he has done. The 1776 and 1750 lots came up 6 months ago, maybe, or less, actually. The desire is to potentially sell 1765 and develop 1776 as a private home for himself. As it is right now, there's 2 houses on the property and 2 addresses, 1750 and 1776. 1750 was carved out of 1776 in 1974? 73. And as Clara noted, it was never formally subdivided by the village, is that correct? Because there are 2 separate pins, 2 separate addresses.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that. Go ahead.
2 separate pins and 2 separate addresses. And it was our understanding in purchasing the property that they were 2 separate lots. The owner at that point wanted everything to go as one piece of, or one sale, and John was in agreement with that. The existing 1750 lot is 0.27 acres, and then the balance is just 2.5 acres overall. So what we're requesting is permission to re-subdivide 1776 into 2 more equal-sized properties, one about 1 acre and one the acre and a half, in order to put 2 homes on the property rather than having what was initially a coach house and a primary residence. I don't know if any of you were able to get out to the property, but both homes and all the accessory buildings are in very, very poor condition. Neither, I guess, really none of them have been maintained for a number of years. So while aesthetically, maybe from the outside, they don't look terrible, there are some photos that we'll shoot forward to that would show you the condition of both homes, unfortunately, are in complete disrepair and really unsalvageable. At this point, is it 1750? Is the basement is completely full of water. It's up to the floor joist.
They shut the power off 30 years ago.
Yeah. So both homes, as I said, have just been have been not maintained. But the goal of the request here and why we wanted to get your feedback, I guess from a zoning standpoint, the original 1776 is non-conforming. It's 2.5 acres in a 5-acre country estate zoning lot. Clearly, both properties are not conforming at this point. You can see with the 2 surveys, the smaller on the right is the front quarter, which is the 0.27 acres, and the other is the balance of the lot. And then the existing structure of the 1750 is also 7 feet from the road, so also non-conforming in terms of its location and setbacks. These are real estate listing floor plans. Just wanted to share with you. Both were done in the 1930s, and I'm not sure when the coach house was built, but the lifestyle and living space and floor plan does not really lend itself to today's family living. Go to the next slide. So what we're proposing is to create a 1-acre property on the north end and then the balance on the south end. And this would enable us to build 2 homes on the property, which John would move into the south lot that would be on the golf course. The next slide. So these are the conditions of the coach house. We'd love to have you come over there. It's also kind of a hazmat situation at this point. But they're, unfortunately, as Bill said, very poorly maintained. That is all paint peeling off the walls, the hole in the floor, kind of on the lower slide. There's a greenhouse that the glass is mostly broken in. The windows, the gutters, everything has just been completely disregarded and is unsalvageable at this point. And then if you want to go to the next slide. This is the main house, similarly, things that just haven't been maintained, broken windows, holes in the ground that leave water and animals and everything, allowing them to get into the house. And then go ahead to the next one. These are the outbuildings, the garages, and that on the bottom right is a bridge where their cats would walk between the garage and the other building. So there's all kinds of, quirky little things here, but unfortunately, just nothing that's salvageable at this stage. Next slide. I think that's pretty much it. So I'd love to get your input on, what the zoning board feels on this, what we're optimistically wanting to make two nicer lots that are in keeping with the other lots in the neighborhood. Nearly everything, the John's lot across the street is 1 acre. Many of the homes around there are 2.5 at the most, and 1 to 1.5 as well. So this would be in keeping with other homes in the area on the Shore Acres property. Some of those are not officially Lake Bluff though, right?
Yeah, some of them are unincorporated.
So, but it still would be in keeping with the neighborhood.
Who'd like to start? Mr. Russell?
I'll jump in. Just to clarify for my fellow members, I went through and tabulated all of the lots up there in Shore Acres, everything north of the golf course that's in the village. There's 22 lots, buildable lots up there. A couple of vacant lots still remain. 15 of the 22 lots are 3 acres and larger. 18 of the lots are 3 acres, and, oh, wait a minute, 12, 15, yeah. 18 of the lots are 2 acres and larger, 15 of the lots are 3 acres and larger. What's being proposed here would still create the smallest lot in the area, and then you'd also be creating the 4th smallest lot in the area. So they'd still be on the small size. The application seems to imply that there were many smaller lots in the Shore Acres up there, but that's not really the case. Nearly all of them are under size for the country estate zoning. When any property is annexed into the village, it is placed in the lowest density district, which is the country estate district. For whatever reason, when all these lots were annexed in the early 70s, for the most part, there never was a procedure to talk about setting a suitable zoning for the area. So that's why we are where we are today. As indicated in the pictures, that little home in the front looks like it was built at the same time, same style architecture as the principal home, and almost certainly was created as a small coach house or gardener's house, something like that, to serve the main estate. So it wasn't, quote unquote, really a separate lot even back then. And I guess that the lines weren't drawn until right before annexation in the 70s to even carve out that parcel, probably for tax purposes. So given all that, the issue of the road and requiring a variation because the other lot that the owner owns on the east side of the road, in my view, that's really a technical snafu in our subdivision ordinance. I would view a lot on the other side of Shore Acres Road as being treated the same way we would treat, there's still a variation that would be required. There's no question about that. But it's something that I think we need to clean up in our code. We've got two private roads up there, Shore Acres Road and Shore Acres Circle, both private. Neither one of them has a public right-of-way. So technically, by zoning code, they're considered to be adjoining lots. But in my view, I don't see that as an issue at all, granting a variation for the issue of the lot on the other side of the street. However, as we stand today, because these lots are way on the small side of what's up there, and the only resident that we've heard from via letter is opposed to creating lots that small, right now, I could not vote in favor of that. However, this issue has never been discussed, to my knowledge, publicly with all of the neighbors up there. So I would hope, if you move forward, I would hope that the village would far exceed the mailing requirements for who needs to be notified, and that they would notify all of the 22 lot owners in Shore Acres so that the Plan Commission and the village board can gauge whether or not the neighborhood really wants to allow lots as small as 1 acre. And that, in my view, would be the determining factor up there. That really is a completely separate area north of the golf course. The most important factor, in my view, is how do the people up there feel about establishing a new minimum lot size requirement, if indeed they want to reduce it at all. The vast majority may want to keep things just the way they are to discourage subdivision of the properties. But until we hear from the neighborhood, I would never want to conduct a vote without making sure that all of the owners up there were notified in writing explaining specifically what's being requested here. So that's all I have.
No, thank you, Mr. Russell. And this, as you know, is simply an informal review.
Yes, exactly.
just a
No,
dialogue.
that's, yeah, very.
When I first
right.
saw it, I thought this is a matter of obviously first impression, and I think the exchange will be critical. Who's next?
I'll go. Yeah, I agree with George on the, just the fact that I think it's an unintended consequence of having the road split it and therefore make it one lot. You know, obviously, if it was on Prospect and I bought my neighbor's house, I wouldn't have one lot, I'd have two lots. So I don't have any problem with that being, and as George said, it still needs to be a variance to the code. I do have an issue with making that already undersized lot more undersized, you know, with the subdivision, and I think that's a great idea to make sure that all the neighbors are aware of it. Because there are a number of, I think, properties up there that do have coach houses or other structures, and they may want to spin them off, or they may be very reluctant to have the possibility of that happening. But once it starts, it certainly can go. So I'd let them very much chime in on what they want. But otherwise, that's where I'd be as well.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
And I'll add to that. You know, one thing that we have discussed in the past, not specifically at Shore Acres, but just in general in the village, is the resistance to establishing flag lots. And it looks like your proposed survey, your proposed subdivision actually produces a flag lot with a small strip going to the main property. So in other parts of the village, we have denied applications or even kind of the idea of establishing new flag lots. Additionally, in other communities south of us on the North Shore, a lot of these country estate areas have been subdivided and kind of chopped up in a manner that, at least in my opinion, I don't think is attractive. And a lot of it is doing just this, is creating a flag lot with a smaller lot in the front and then the larger lot in behind. So I would also be hesitant to approve this subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Troll. Ms. Danley?
But really, one doesn't know until you really seek the approval or conversations with your neighbors, and I would encourage that too. So, you know, to hear from what they have to say. I live between two flag lots, and I don't recommend it at all. It's, you know, it is a conflict of interest at times on many levels, but anyhow, I know the hardship is that you want to live there and you want to build and prosper financially too with something that could be quite beautiful. So I don't think I'm looking at an end result that could be a negative, it could be a positive, and it's all a matter of reaching out and having those conversations. So everything else has been said that I agree with.
Yeah, I guess one of my initial reactions was whether or not this proposal, so to speak, was consistent with our zoning code. And I think we have to work our way through that particular issue because it almost right now appears to be inconsistent in that we're country estates. But I think as various of the commissioners have spoken, and the import of that survey, so to speak, or the neighbors' reaction or interaction will be critical just to see how they perceive the area to be going in the future. I think we'd addressed the public street, private drive issue, but those are our preliminary comments. Any other questions or any,
Oh, you know what I was going to say? Sometimes I think just building a quick little massing model, and, serving a great beverage could be, but I mean, I think it really helps to really understand that trees, massing, how it relates, because everyone really needs, it would help understand
Okay.
a visual exercise for everybody.
Let me
Perhaps,
ask
and
one thing.
placement of it.
I guess if, given that they are two separate properties, right? I know the village doesn't interpret that, but they legally are two separate properties with two separate pins. If we were to just work with as existing, do we still need to get a variance for that? I mean, it's because they're
Specifically for 1776.
76 and 1750, right? So,
So, yeah, as from our addressing standpoint, that lot is 1776 with the main house and the coach house. And that would require a variance process. And with our current code, having the home at 1765 and then building one new home on the 1776 lot would require that variance process, which is what the PCZBA members are discussing. One other option that the PCZBA can consider or give feedback on too is instead of requiring a variation for the specifically having one residence on each lot to the side of the private road is having something in the ordinance that says there's an exception to the undersized lot provision that would say that if there's areas that are on either side of the of a private road, that would not count towards that or something along those lines, so that a variation process wouldn't be needed. That's
Right, it would be a text amendment. So the
Yeah.
idea is if you think that the non-conforming lot provision that would dictate that if you have two lots owned with common ownership separated by a private drive, that should be considered two separate lots, and you think that should be true village-wide, then it might be more appropriate to do a text amendment. And that text amendment can be applied for by the PCZBA or asked for by the applicant. And from a planning perspective, even if the applicant weren't to move forward, it's something that would be in your prerogative. If you think it's a good text amendment to our code, that you could ask be brought forward. So, something to consider.
Yeah, but that wouldn't address the 1776 issue that
Okay.
you're
And I guess
asking
to put on the 1776 issue, just to put a fine point on it, I believe you were speaking about the two separate PIN numbers.
correct.
So the PIN, and the PIN numbers that are assigned by the assessor is a separate process and a separate issue from a legal lot of record that is created through a subdivision process. And there are numerous properties that can have multiple pins, anywhere from one to, I guess theoretically could create lots that have hundreds if it's a big, multi-unit building. Or you see lots that often have them because they may have like a cell tower or a property that's rented out. And so for tax purposes, a different tax pin will be assigned to pieces of a lot. But from a zoning perspective, a subdivision perspective, from our code perspective, what we're concerned about is the subdivision plat that was adopted in the 1920s that currently governs, not the PIN number. And that's the distinction. So that's why, under the code, something has to happen to make it, the variation if, body wants to recommend separating it into two lots.
Ms. Fisher?
Yeah, because that actually is one question that I had, because when you look at the tax assessor site, it just, for both pins are addressed 1776. So I'm not sure, is 1750, have we decided that is a legal buildable lot? Or, okay, not necessarily, right? I mean, it's back to 17.
The village's staff
Right.
attorney has said it's not a legal buildable
Right,
lot.
so that's the guiding I mean, that's, okay, good. All right, that's what it was coming up with when I was looking.
Yep.
being an informal hearing, would it be appropriate to discuss separating, having two separate homes by common ownership divided by a private road? I mean, is that something that we can discuss here?
Yep. Yeah, you're not taking any final action
Okay.
on it tonight. So, but if it's something that, again, if it's something that you would like, encourage the applicant to move ahead with a variation application on that particular issue, you can do it that way. If you think it's more appropriate as a text amendment, you can direct staff to prepare an application for a text amendment.
Can I ask a question? What if the homeowners was to sell 1765?
Just that one piece of it?
On the other side of the road. They were bought completely separate
So,
at different times.
so once it becomes into common ownership, the problem arises. So the way the code works is that once you have adjoining lots that are undersized, that come into common ownership forever, they are treated under our code, absent a variation, they would be treated as one lot.
So
Going forward.
technically, he can't even sell his house.
Well, he can sell it. And let me be clear, that just because this, this is a
Yeah, I mean,
legally
that's it,
technical
it's-
issue. You
yeah.
can sell anything. We don't approve sales.
Right.
So that is not a village decision whether somebody wants to buy it and whether a deed transfers. The issue is, once it's sold, will that person be able to come in and say, I'd like to tear down this house, I want to construct, and when they come in, they're going to find that when staff looks at it, they're going to say, this has been held in common ownership. We can't just authorize under our code, building permits and allowing somebody to proceed. It creates the problem. And so the idea from a planning perspective, and the reason that these type of provision is here, as well as in almost in most codes in the area, is that when you have small, undersized lots that come into common ownership, the idea is you want them to be combined to be more consistent with the zoning that you've established. So that's the opportunity to do it. So again, if you think it's appropriate for a text amendment, so that would not be an issue, and that property then could be sold and as a buildable lot, that is your prerogative.
Are there other private roads in town that this would apply to? You can think of offhand?
Well, Shore Acres Circle at the top of
Sure.
Shore Acres Drive is,
Yeah. Is
it's
the
almost
other
viewed
one.
as one
Crabtree?
road,
But would that be the only?
there are a couple other private roads up there, I'm not oh yeah, that driveway down off of
Yeah.
Moffett too, across from Crescent.
And probably Crabtree.
But we don't have to do a text amendment for every private road in the village, because it could get very complicated, but we certainly could move forward.
Just wondering
Can we
whether.
then, with
whether-
just the Shore Acres Road, Shore Acres Circle area?
So there's, okay, so there's a couple ways to do it. Again, you could do it where we just take the provision that apply, that we're talking about, and have an exception and, carve out when there are lots in common ownership and they're adjacent only because of a private drive. And we could make that exception, and it would apply village-wide. If you wanted to do it to just a certain area of town or just the country estate, you could do that as an exception. And so you can craft it however you'd like.
I just wonder if we want to be able to look at each individual applicant instead of just a blanket text amendment. Because each case is going to be unique, right? I mean,
You're talking about in different areas of the village.
yeah, different
Yeah.
areas of the village, and perhaps the variance process would be preferable, so that we could have at least see each property and each applicant instead of allowing it as with a text amendment.
So, if that's the direction, we can work with staff to come up with some options for you and present some options.
Yes.
I don't remember if it was in the packet, but, so the current home that you live in, what's the lot size of that one?
It's just under an acre.
Just under an acre?
Right.
Okay. So in total, the one parcel on one side of the road and the one parcel with two pins on the other side of the road, what is the total acreage of?
3.5.
About 3.5, okay. So that would be in conforming with the numbers that you brought to us in the beginning. 3 acres roughly, but still non-conforming for country estate. Okay, thank you.
All right, let me throw one more glitch into this then. If a neighbor that adjoins 1776 wanted to purchase part of that property, is that even possible? Let's say they wanted to buy the corner, wanted to buy the little 2.27 acre lot.
So again, we don't at the village,
No, I understand, but
right, we aren't approving
but-
sales, so
but-
could they
right.
purchase it? Yes.
Okay,
But the issue is still the subdivision issue, where you have a legal lot of records. So if somebody were to buy a corner, it creates other issues, which is, it wouldn't be subdivided along those lines, which could pose a problem down the road when anybody wants to build. So, the typical process would be if somebody wants to buy a piece of land, not along current property boundaries, but that they would do a subdivision process and go through that, and if they need variations or whatever they're going to need, but to do it in that manner, so you don't create problems where somebody has something that, prevents them from building in the future.
if they were trying to, if the neighbor to the south wanted to take that lot and absorb that into their property, we'd still have to go through a variance, I assume,
They
for
would,
that, or just?
they could they could purchase it, but there would still be issues of where the lot line is and from a subdivision standpoint. And you would also have a problem where the current lot, the remainder of the lot that you have would still be now becoming more undersized.
Understand, right,
yeah,
and that's
so-
why I'm asking, yeah,
yeah.
it's just, yeah.
So, but my recommendation is if there's a situation where neighbors would like to buy pieces, that you may want to consult your own attorney, also work with village staff, and we can work to identify what may need to happen, because the last thing we want is somebody to buy property and then find out they're in a situation that, they're not happy with the purchase because of the zoning restrictions.
Yeah, just for what it's worth, just so I can fill in the blanks. I live in Los Angeles. I grew up in Winnetka. And I'm fortunate to be a member of Shore Acres, and this property came on 1765, and I bought it. And it was, I put a lot of money into it because this was kind of the dream home. And then the lots across the street came for sale, and of course, around the golf course. So I said, okay, now we got a problem. So I ended up buying those, the understanding, kind of there was 2 lots, because there appeared to be an appetite for the smaller lot. So I'm not, just to make it clear, I'm not coming in here as like a developer. This is, I want to be, part of the community, have a house for later in life. That's a thought.
I'm just wondering if it would be beneficial to, and I don't think we've done this before, continue the informal review to give you a chance to
Yeah, I would like
digest
to-
the
yeah,
various
we've
comments.
certainly reached out to the immediate adjacent neighbors, and we can reach out to the others as well. But they're in favor because the property is in such disrepair. So they're absolutely in favor of putting in, somebody investing in the property, no question.
But correct me if I'm wrong, or Drew, if it would move forward to request for a formal variation for lot size requirements, the village would want to notify all 22 lot owners up there, not just the immediate 2 or 3 to make that decision, render an opinion. We would want everyone up there to know that this variation request has been made. Is that not correct? Would we not do that?
We can certainly notice as much as we want. If there's any prohibition on how far we notice.
Is it typically 250 or 400 feet?
Typically 3.
Minimum distance.
Okay,
So it's
okay,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
I was going to throw out the ADU option, I don't know the ultimate use of that small, that is available as a tool.
Yeah, and that was included in our staff memo as well. The option of the ADU accessory dwelling unit to have an additional home on the property, but that wouldn't be one that could be sold off.
Okay,
That's
so more like a coach house then? Okay.
And I guess just one other point, obviously, we're missing two commissioners today. I think an issue like this, you'd want to have the full panel
Agreed.
present. And anybody else wish to speak on the issue right now?
One other thing I just want to add is that, you know, the house that John bought 2 years ago, I don't know if you were familiar with it before he took over. It was a disaster area.
Not as bad, but but not
He
far.
put a lot of money and time, and the neighbors love it. It's enhanced the neighborhood. And it's just kind of the same thing we're trying to do. It's just, his vision was to live in Shore Acres. His real vision would be, God, I love a house on the golf course. This man lives and breathes golf. If this had come up, knowing, you know, he was sold 1765, so that this issue wouldn't have happened. You know, it wasn't anything intentional to try to scam anybody. He just wants his final house to be on the golf course, of the course that he's been a member for 20, 30 years or whatever. So he's improved the neighborhood. You should come see it all.
Yeah.
The house that he redid, what it looked like before and after, and what this place looks like right now. It's unbelievable how bad it is.
Yeah, it's too bad. Sad.
And the applicant has been notified of the HPC provisions that even to demolish the existing house, he's going to have to go through a process that could be potentially longer than the subdivision process. I just wanted to make sure you'd already been told that. Because,
We did talk about the Historic Preservation Commission and that being part of the
Correct.
process
I
as
mean,
well for
with the
demolition.
coach house, I thought the main house was just contributing.
Correct, it would
Right.
still have to go through the review process, though.
Anyone who'd like to come see it, you're welcome to. But yeah, it's, you know, as you said, it's unfortunate that it's become as run down as it has, so. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, no, I appreciated all the input, so thank you.
Yeah, we can just continue
Yeah, it's not a public hearing.
Yeah. Oh, Drew's in the back.
You drew? I am. I'm John. I'm with et cetera. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
From, oh, yes, over.
All right, agenda item number 5. Ms. Gable, if you could present that for us?
Yes. So the village's planning consultant, Tuska and Associates, will provide an update on the draft goals and actions of the comprehensive land use plan and request feedback. We have Michael Blue from Tuska here, who will be giving a presentation. And let me get this off of Zoom and his presentation on. Just one second.
Oh, and before we get into Michael's presentation, Ms. Gable, if we could have some Google Earth pictures the next time around on this particular issue, just to better visualize.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, yeah. And sorry,
Yeah,
our
no, no.
Zoom is just having issues today. There we go.
Thank you.
And let me get Michael's presentation up quickly. There we go. Sorry about that. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if you're okay, I'm glad to dive in.
All set? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Booth.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the PCZBA, everybody else is here. It's good to see you again. Understanding you have a number of items on your agenda, we sent you this packet of information that summarizes and builds on what we did last time. It was not our intent, given your agenda tonight, to workshop the details out of every line that's in here, the way we did last time. That was very productive and helpful, but was not our intent for tonight. What I'd like to do is to talk through just a little bit about, okay, what do we do with all of that now? First thing is that we did revise what we had, and we've built on that. So I just want to share that, walk through some of those items, see if you have any initial reactions to them or thoughts about things that are like, this is a great one, this one is ridiculous, just to help us move forward, and I'll explain towards the end what we're going to do. So, Clara, if we could do the next slide, just to let you know, this is to show that we are basically smack dab in the middle of the process, in that the data collection, public input, learning phase comes to an end, along with the policy development, which was that workshop we had last time. And what is our task next is to build on that and to bring you some strategic actions and some recommendations that the plan will include. And so tonight is effectively our way of saying, are we moving in the right direction so we can bring you some substantive, more detailed actions? What those will be based on is, on the next slide, shows that two things. One is the previous plan, the discussions of this plan, the way people have talked to us about the community, the way we all view it and the way you all live in it is based geographically. And so the plan is going to respect and reflect that, and the action statements and the goals that you saw do that. And that's on the right side. On the left side of this slide is this idea that we came up with, all right, Drew came up with the idea. I got to give credit where credit is due. Was the idea that the fundamental goals, these strategic actions that you have before you, this shared vision of the community is kind of foundational to the plan. That's kind of reasonable. Based on that foundation is the plan making, and that's the next step that I'm suggesting that we do. Beyond that will become the implementation of the comprehensive plan. So the plan will ultimately have a number of actions, and if you've had a chance to look through some of these strategic action items, you've seen some things that are specific actions to be taken, whether they're changing a zoning ordinance or changing something. Some of them are about installing things, whether or not it's wayfinding or something else. Some of them are about preserving the character of the community. Very much the conversation you just had, I might add. They're about who to partner with, right? So you saw the word partner in there a number of times, and so that's important. And so that's what that application part is. That's what this plan-making step is going to take us towards. So if we could go to the next slide, I would just, the next two slides actually summarize those fundamental planning goals that we workshopped last time we were here. And these have been revised based on the conversation that we had. And what I'll say now is, if there's any of these you'd like to discuss now, certainly glad to do that. If you'd like to send us emails and correspond that way about refining some of these things, that's fine too. Again, understand you've got more items on the agenda tonight, and we did not anticipate workshopping every one of these statements. But this and the next slide, thank you, summarize those statements. So again, without getting into wordsmithing, if there's wordsmithing, please send an email through Clara, and we will certainly get to that and refine it. But our hope and our intent is that these two slides summarize what we talked about last time. And if there's a difference or something we missed or something that maybe needs to be added, we can talk about that now, or we can hear from you more later.
Well, just to clarify, the last item we have on the agenda tonight is a pretty slam dunk issue that's going to take about 3 minutes. So I know I came tonight thinking that we were really going to talk about all of these recommendations. Personally, I know I have questions about a lot of them.
I'm always prepared to do that. And
So I don't know how the other members felt, but
whatever the commission would like.
I felt like this was a meeting to really start rolling up our sleeves and getting into the nuts and bolts of what's going to go in the document.
Go
I'm
Yeah,
giving you a headache through already.
I'm here.
So I'm just clarifying.
No, I'm here for you all, and I realize,
Really, the rest of the meeting, because the last item is.
Yeah, I totally agree,
so I-
George.
I was trained to never think anything's a slam dunk, but I'm here for as long as y'all are.
So I-
No, if you've got the time, Mr. Blue, I think we're certainly prepared to talk
Outstanding.
more thoroughly.
Well, then let's start with these.
Before we do that, can we back up to the map?
Anything you say.
Because you, very clearly, the way you're intending to present this in the document, everything keys off of the map.
It relates back to the map, yeah.
I mean, you've created these geographical areas, and I know we had one quick crack at this before, in terms of, I know we wanted to split off the natural corridor from the recreation corridor, but I don't remember, like, Crabtree Farm being shaped like that before. Crabtree Farm, to me, is an extremely unique area in the village. So you've either combined part of the properties north of Crabtree Farm with the village, or you've cut off Mr. Bryant's estate from Crabtree Farm. So I don't know, but I really feel that Crabtree is a really unique area that's really part of the village character. And I think on a map like this, and the number of times that we reference Crabtree Farm in the next 6 pages, that we want to just talk about Crabtree. We don't want to talk about all the lots on Arbor Drive, because I don't think it's the same issue at all. So that's number one, is very important to me, and especially when there are comments further on about Crabtree being identified as under the category of identifying underutilized areas.
That's great, that's why we're here.
There's a thrust, it seems to me, to advocate for a different type of housing in Crabtree other than single family. There's a number of different statements encouraging cluster development for Crabtree, study the location for multiple family housing, referring to Crabtree, then adding housing to underutilized pieces of property, specifically referring to Crabtree, facilitating housing diversity. To me, that was the biggest alarm bell in reading all of this, is where is this recommendation for Crabtree coming from? Because I would never, ever label Crabtree Farms as an underutilized piece of property. It's a jewel in the community. And so number one, I think it's very important that the map identify what exactly is Crabtree Farm, and it's not shaped like that. But because the map's so small, I can't really tell what the northern border is drawn on there. And then I also, a second area that the village, I was hoping the comp plan would definitely address, is the Highway 41 corridor for the properties that are in the village. That is the biggest eyesore in the entire community, and I hope in the next 5 to 10 years it's an area where the village can really get the 41 commercial corridor north of 176 cleaned up. So it's completely different than the 176 strip west of the railroad. So I would advocate that we split those in the two different districts, because there's completely different levels of issues there. I had a couple other smaller issues that I'll just give to Clara. And just a tiny little typo like that, where it's not West Terraces, it's not East Terraces, it's the terrace. Each of those, so that the S that is repeated all the way through the document for terraces is just terrace.
Thank you.
And then I've got other, the unincorporated areas, I think we should be consistent and show them all as white on the map. So that, like the parcel connecting the sanctuary down there, that's actually in the village, whereas up in Shore Acres there, that boxed out area is not in the village. So I think for consistency, especially when we talk about potential annexation, a third party picking up this document isn't going to know what we're talking about if we reference one of these geographical areas. Like I know there's Armor Woods is listed under potential annexations. That's what's listed, Armor Woods. But I think what you really mean is the area
Area
north
north
of
of
Armor
there.
Woods.
Right.
So I think those type of things need to get cleaned up.
Excellent, thank you.
So, I mean, I have just oodles of red lines about the way we parceled out these different geographical areas to the different recommendations, where some of them just didn't seem to apply at all. Like I think Crabtree was part of the annexation, in one of the annexation comments, and unless you're going to annex Lake Michigan, I don't know what, and maybe it's just a plain mistake, I don't know. But
the whole,
at any
just
rate,
part of it.
I felt like there were many inconsistencies when we tried to list all these different
Attaching the geographies, you mean?
geographical areas, and other than slugging through that, I don't know how to clean it up, but and I don't know if anyone else spent the kind of time reading through it that I did, but it just seems that there's a major cleanup is needed, and then some of the things I disagree with, but everyone else on the board may say.
But you're talking about things
you're
that
all
aren't,
wet.
you're talking about, not talking about things that are policy questions, you're talking about areas that, and we admittedly tried to be broader than I think you're seeing it and perhaps the group sees it, and so taking some of those out is certainly, within what we'd be thinking. We'd certainly welcome that kind of clarity to it.
So I don't know, Gary, what,
Yeah,
I'm going from past experience where I was never on this side of the table when the Plan Commission had the last two gigantic efforts, but there was literally, in the 1990s, there was literally hundreds of hours spent by the members, I mean, literally approving the entire document before it went to public hearing, and then even when we tried around 2005 to update the plan, but for lack of staff support, it couldn't get done. Even then, there was just a lot of detailed work done by the Plan Commission members. So I'm coming from the viewpoint of expecting that every one of these recommendations.
And I didn't mean to imply we didn't want to hear all of that.
We're literally going to go
Absolutely.
through every one of them, and the majority would say up or down. But it doesn't sound like that's what you were intending to do, and maybe staff was intending to do, but I don't know. I've talked enough. I'll let the other members jump in.
And
No, my impression, Mr. Russell, was that we'd probably have to go line by line, just to make sure that we understood definitionally.
It's a lot of work, but I would
Well,
think
and
we'd want
I'm
to do
game,
it
and if the rest of the
before
commission
public
is,
hearing.
if the rest of the commission's game to do that, I think that'd be fine. The alternative is that we could take an edit that you've got, if others don't have that level of detail. We could frankly do a red line and send that back to you. Whatever the commission wants, or we could go through one at a time now and be led through it as you see fit, Mr. Chair. That's your call.
My thought is almost going through line by line, and, we could have a cutoff, whenever that is. I'm not sure how long it's gonna take, but I had a lot of specific questions.
Great.
I guess one of my first questions was, Mr. Blue, on the map, I mean, we have recreation corridor, but should we have the golf course kind of identified in there? Because I look upon the recreation corridor as being primarily golf course. But,
So he's saying,
Yeah,
'cause we've captured the school, we've captured residential housing on the, it's all lumped into recreation corridor. There's areas of residential housing in there, and the school is in there. So it's a question of, do you want to carve out the golf
Yeah.
course and the other, the
Yeah.
park versus what's not park?
What stood out to us, and then we can do this any way you all say, as Commissioner Russell said, the idea is that this is coming from you all, and we're in many ways the idea people in the scribe, and, do as you see is appropriate. But it struck us that the area generally is a big wide green space that separates parts of the town, rather than being at this level so specific about the uses.
Yeah, if I may, real quick.
Mr.
And taking another step back, is that when we first started talking about it, the 97 plan
is a quadrant-based system, you know, and the staff is the main user of this document. And we said, this is how we converse about the community. We, you know, by subdivision, by area, and that's how most residents talk about it too. And we thought this would be probably the most easy from a user standpoint, and that's why we're breaking out by subdivision. We tried to keep it more broad brush where we thought, and there's trade-offs with that, and you've identified just one, and there's a lot more. But we can get more specific, and then it starts looking like a zoning map and less, you know, planning, and so that's the trade-off. So we were just trying to just understand that was the vision or our approach to this. It was how do the users want to identify with it, and yeah, it's imperfect. Again, it's a kind of it's a wide Sharpie, not a Sharpie. But that's the background why we went that way, just so you know.
Okay.
Well said, thank you.
Great. Should we get into line 1, sentence 1? I mean, are any other questions regarding the map, or? I guess I had a question, Mr. Blue, how do you define nuisance factors, or what is a nuisance factor? In the first planning goal.
From the standpoint of a fundamental planning goal, it's about incompatible land uses, right? So the things that might be located next to other land uses. So the way the community is built up, so many of those commercial and business park uses are already separated. But what might be incompatible? This might be a question that might come up with Lot 3, right? How are you impacting the adjacent properties? Would you put something commercial back there? Those kinds of things. So from the standpoint of this, it's more about different types of land uses than others, not so much the nuisance that one might have from a code enforcement or a property maintenance standpoint.
And this is an area, if I may jump into this first comment, that we start out by saying maintain high standards of appearance. And as I said in my introductory comment, why I thought we needed to split out the 41 commercial corridor north of 176 was that area is, if everything else of the village is a 9 or a 10, that's a 2. And it just seems like if we're going to identify high priority items for the next 10 years, cleaning up that, and you actually developed a system where you're recommending that we do assign high priority areas to items. So I thought, it clearly applies to all geographies, but we should also say the Highway 41 commercial district as with an asterisk. Does anybody disagree with me about that area up there?
Might want to change.
Doesn't look like it belongs in the village.
Might want to change the color on the north of 176.
To a different, an orange or something.
Yeah, I was just going to say something along those lines, and Drew makes a good point. Again, keep in mind that the goals in the next 2 slides in particular are 30,000-foot types of statements, right? They're fundamental goals. They're very much what was in the previous plan. The idea is that those strategic actions that follow these, that build on these, are more at the 5 to 10, I don't know. They're closer to the ground and more detailed. And the idea is that if these ideas, as they get more detailed, are appropriate, that's what we'll start to build some recommendations on. So the idea about incompatible land uses, about improving the appearance of the community, I mean, those all lead to this idea of doing what can be done. Some of those areas are unincorporated, I realize, but doing what can be done to enhance those areas. These fundamental goals are not statements that are that specific. The next group of statements, those strategic actions, are more along the lines of getting to those things. And to the extent that those things are in line with what the village should be doing, the goal of cleaning up the area is a perfect example, right? And then the next thing we will bring you, which will be some more detailed recommendations, can start to talk more specifically about those things. So to the extent that we want to highlight what should be addressed under these fundamental goals, like all of your collective notes, those are great. I'm more inclined to take those down as insights to build on than to refine these 30,000-foot statements. Does that make sense? I mean, appreciate you sharing all of them.
Addressed as under a strategic action item, I would have no problem with keeping that as all geographies. Yeah, as long as it's addressed somewhere in our.
And that's the
plan.
level that it's meant to function at, the statement. Am I making this fuzzier? Is that the
Yeah.
problem?
Then on the other hand, when you jump, do you have this on, to put up on the screen?
So I have,
We have the general
goals, but I-
statements, not the geographies, but we could probably pull up the memo with the more detail in it, too.
Because you're, just as an
But I've
example,
got it
that
in
was
front of
very
me.
confusing with your geographies, because you did break out geographies for all of these fundamental planning goals. So on item number 4, bolster business districts, you specifically listed 176 commercial corridor in the central business district, but you left out the business park.
Okay.
That was a question, I'm assuming that was just an oversight.
Yes.
But, so it's confusing when you say, let's keep it really broad, but then you do go and break out geographies for every single.
That's what I was going to ask you. Would it have offended you less had they left out the specific neighborhoods? If it was just the statements, like what's on the screen now? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I think there has to be some nexus there between a lot of these, especially once you get to the strategic action
Actions,
items.
sure.
'Cause
So maybe
otherwise-
that's the better-
Otherwise, it gets
Maybe that's
really,
the
really
better
confusing.
place for the geographies is in the strategic actions as opposed to the goals.
But
They're all, yeah, they're all broken out further, and just eliminate geographies and the goals.
Yeah.
that's certainly an approach we'd have no problem with. Would that, would the group be amenable to that?
Well, we want to do it, obviously, what's best for the village in the long haul, and I'm not sure that, from my perspective, it's fine to have the different geographies in there, but they have to be accurate.
Okay, then, again, we will get back to making them accurate, and Commissioner Russell, anything that you've got in notes and things that we missed, we'll always appreciate that. But if the consensus of the group is to leave the geographies in these broader statements, I think that's fine as well. I would be a little bit more generous in terms of adding geographies to these broader statements, because they will apply more broadly, and then make the lists narrower as we get to the strategic actions, though, would be my suggestion.
What's best, Ms. Gable?
So as Drew mentioned earlier, with staff being the primary user of this, I think it may be beneficial to have the geographies in there, and then as we move forward with the more strategic actions and even getting higher up on that pyramid, we can kind of dive deeper into the individual. Would you agree with that, Drew?
Has the village had a chance to go through all the geographies and strike some or add some? Or not yet? I just wasn't sure exactly.
We have not, I mean, this is not final, this is like, we're putting this together and getting in front of you, knowing that this is conceptual, just tell us if you have big heartburn with the direction it's headed, you know.
Okay. Deb?
I just have a couple questions. Belforet, is that in here because Belforet is bigger than the current Belforet? I mean, is it going to, are we talking?
Go back to your map there for Deb's
Yeah,
sake.
are we talking?
Yeah, they're really talking district, so they're calling that the Belfray District, which includes Thorn Valley, it
Okay,
includes
going down.
Pigney Court.
Okay.
It includes the Kinsel Estate, I believe. It's hard to tell on a map this small,
Right,
but it
the
looks like,
southern-
so
the
that was the
10-acre.
other thing about the map down at Bath and Tennis, you used the word district. And you really are creating districts, but then you didn't use the word district for any of the other districts. It's kind of inconsistent. So, because it is, I got confused reading the recommendations when it would just say Belfray. And I would go, well, they're not
Belfray
really
is
talking
an
about
existing
something in
subdivision,
Belfray.
but
They're
is it
probably
more?
talking about Dr. Kinsel's 16-acre parcel that could be redeveloped.
Right.
And it's in the Belfray District on the map. So
Yeah.
I think there needs to be real consistency here, because Drew, you aren't here, but anyone that lived through the Stonebridge approval and the long, long court cases, there was very specific language talking about, when it was re-subdivided, which areas we should use as a guideline for the change in density. And there was a huge uproar about what was really meant by the area to the south, and it was because of almost the same issue here. The map wasn't very precise. So you may not think this map is important, but in big subdivision issues, it can become very, very important.
Understood.
And I
Agree completely.
I can't tell you how badly staff wished the planning document had have nailed or been just better at referencing the geographical area they were talking about for changing the zoning density. And it just didn't happen. And, the attorneys came in on both sides arguing this is what it meant, this is what it didn't mean. So it's something that shouldn't be taken too lightly. I think the map, if we're going to use all these geographical area references, it's important to really show the area we're talking about, get the map bigger so that we can see where the dividing
We
lines
can
are.
make it more precise. Yeah.
And as Drew said earlier, the intent was to find the balance between having a level of specificity but not turning it into a surrogate zoning map.
I understand.
And I think we hear what you're saying about the benefit of more specificity in terms of where the lines break and which unique parcels are in which of these districts. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, we're not trying to be critical, Mr. Blue, it's just, I look upon this as a very, very critical roadmap, and.
Agree completely, thank you.
That specificity, I think, is going to be very beneficial in the long run.
Agreed, thank you. Do we want to keep moving through the, no, I'm forgetting, the fundamental planning goals, in terms of which geographies either are or aren't, or should we be going back and redoing the map before we do those, or can we kind of do those with a but-for approach as we go through?
I guess what's most efficient is the key.
Let's go through and let us know what either you take issue with or we've missed.
Okay.
So we got to number 4 in the memo of the fundamental goals. Let's keep going down. And I'm not looking to read everyone, but to
Okay, so
to the extent that
My
Commissioner
next
Russell
one on
or
my
others,
list was number 6.
to the extent Commissioner Russell or others have questions
I'm
and
sorry,
comments, share.
I'm sorry I'm doing a lot of talking. Did anybody have a problem with number 5?
No, I did not.
Okay, so then number 6, so here's one that really threw me with these geographical references: pursue appropriate annexations. And we've got Armor Woods listed, Business Park listed. I'm sure you mean areas near these, but
Right.
for this particular one, we should not be listing the geographical areas. We should be targeting the unincorporated area in Shore Acres.
Yeah.
The 17641 commercial corridors, the lots that aren't in the village, Arden Shore Estates north and south. There's just 3 or 4 key, there's really only 4 potential annexations.
Yeah, and again, the idea, like I said, we were broader rather than narrower here, and the idea is these are essentially the ones that are kind of at the edges where annexations would abut, was kind of the idea, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, this one was really confusing, though, to use geographical area. It threw it just, what are we talking about? It just didn't make any sense.
Okay, good, appreciate that.
Yeah, Crabtree Farm was listed. I have no idea what annexation area was listed.
I
for-
told you,
yeah,
just that
that's what I
little,
said, Lake Michigan was
just
the
that
only-
little corner of the lake is all we want. Yeah, no, and I apologize, that is, as you said before, the area just kind of further north from there, that's why that got in there. Just, again, us using the broad, the wide marker, which apparently was the wrong call. I appreciate hearing differently.
Oh,
So 6, 7?
7, once again, we left out Business Park for,
Again, for what it's worth, and this carries throughout, and rather than bringing it up later, just wanted to mention, we had talked about the possibility of the business park being perhaps a more residential or mixed-use kind of area. There was a presentation about that last time we were here. And it's an interesting idea, but given current economics and the idea of preserving tax base in the village, we didn't incorporate that notion into the plan. Doesn't mean that it couldn't follow through at some point, but wasn't picked up here. So if you're wondering, where was that idea we saw the presentation of? It's really not picked up here. The idea is about preserving the tax base and commercial and non-residential opportunities of the business park. So just wanted to say that before I forgot as we got further on. Number 8 talks about the natural assets and applies to all geographies. Sorry, I said I wouldn't stop on every one. Anything with number 8 to revise or refine? 9? 8?
No, I'm thinking more 9.
9, okay. Yes, sir.
Certainly have to strike Crabtree Farms, I think.
Got it.
Bath and Tennis is pretty well built out, isn't it? So I'd probably strike that.
I mean, most of these areas are built out. I'm assuming what this is driving at is the change from single family to multiple family opportunities.
It's that
And
missing-
what really,
it's
I
that-
really struggle with personally is the village is primarily a village of single family homes. And that's part, to me, that's part of the character. I know we always struggle with character, but that, we are principally a village of single-family homes, and there's just, there's got to be a dozen different lines along this same general goal that seem to be encouraging that we look at literally every area for multiple family housing. And I know I personally don't think it's a good idea. I know some people do. There are areas where possibly it's okay around the business district, the huge lots that could be redeveloped. But I mean, I would think that 80 to 90% of the residents, if you ask them, if you went out to the single family areas and you asked them, do you want a multiple family development on the lot next to you? Like the letter that we received today where someone was advocating allowing construction on the original 25-foot lots. There are homes on Center Avenue that have 5 25-foot lots. One home, the recorded lots is 5 25-foot lots. Does anyone in the village, other than maybe this one person, want 5 small homes built on Center where there's one home today? And to multiply that endlessly? So I am just really struggling with, because we constantly say, let's preserve the village's character, but let's dive in and reference all of these areas for diversifying housing, and I'm struggling big time with it. Especially
I would ask that you all-
when Crabtree Farm, an area like that, I just don't get it.
I would ask that you have some discussion on that, because you've put your finger on a very big question about the plan and what this missing middle discussion has been all about. And I would be interested to hear what the rest of the commission has to say, because I think you put your finger on it.
I think the definition of diversity in housing is different for everybody, and I don't know that we have decided on that. We've struggled with that for years, right? I mean, we tried to do it with Stonebridge, that was going to bring diversity of housing. We've tried to do it in so many ways, and one person's definition might be low or affordable housing, right? That was something that came to us at one point when we started talking about diversity of housing. Some residents said, oh, we don't want affordable housing in Lake Bluff. Sounds like your definition is multifamily housing is what diversity of housing is, but it could just be perhaps a 2,200 square foot house instead of a 4,500 square foot house, right? Those two houses alone provide diversity, as opposed to, your example is one home on 5 25-foot parcels, I mean, obviously, we don't want to tear that one home down and put an apartment building on it. But, there could be an argument if there is a home that is in disrepair, maybe it could be divided into 2 or 3 smaller homes if it's that size of a lot. So in my mind, that's what diversity of housing is it's not continuing to build to the maximum allowable square footage and encouraging perhaps smaller construction.
Yeah, and just to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, in terms of if the plan indeed is for a 20-year forward look, I'm challenged to think that maybe 20 years from now, we will be more open to the idea of smaller or things like that. And, I do think that there are, what is it that, if we look at the scale as opposed to the square footage and everything, some of the ones that look like a single family, but they are actually a duplex. I don't know that would be so horrific if somebody came to me and said, hey, next door to you, we would like to build this. If it was done to look like a single family and it was 2 homes, because I just see, everything that we're hearing is more and more people looking for either, I would like to, in this thing, broaden the description of who we're looking at. We just talk about empty nesters, pretty much empty nesters and seniors. I think it's people starting out. I think it's divorced people. I think it's single parent kind of people who may not be looking for as big. But I'm not opposed to the idea, I think, in general, of something that looks scale-wise appropriate, but is actually multifamily or something. So just to throw that out, because I don't know what 20 years from now is going to bring us. And we're going to be living with this for probably 30, the way we do things, but.
And that's great. Can I add to that? Mm-hmm. What is it? Yes, and is the way you're supposed to do these things? Yes, and in terms of the geographies that are listed here, agree that they've been listed a little broadly, but what would be interesting to know is which of these geographies do you think that idea would be okay in? That would be an interesting step to take. I'm not suggesting or recommending anything. Let the record be clear, right? But the conversation you just had prior to this matter was about trying to put 2 homes on essentially a lot, right? If that was going to be approached from the missing middle housing, and granted, this is a neighborhood with minimum 5-acre lots, this is maybe not the best example, but would this be an area where exactly what you described, Commissioner Fisher, where there's a larger home, wait, it's not a larger home, it's 2 homes, and you saw the sketches from the Opticos presentation. These kinds of things are possible. Are there areas where that kind of infill has merit? And I know there will be different opinions, but would just suggest that maybe we look at these geographies and cross off the ones where it's not. And if it's all of them, it's all of them, or if it's none of them, it's none of them. But that's the way I would suggest that we frame the question. Again, would just reiterate, Commissioner Russell put his finger right on the question that this whole missing middle housing thing is about. And it's an important question for the plan. And we talked about it when we did the residential zoning change, the RPD. So are there geographies that are listed here in 9 where Commissioner Fisher's idea is at least worth talking about?
I'm not sure I would agree to that. I feel like, I'm jumping to 12 when we say avoid development that's out of scale with residential neighborhoods. If we start with the language of let's keep everything the way it is, and now you're saying let's find or eliminate the areas that might be a problem for development, we're already going down a very, very narrow path. And I think, for me, that's what's difficult in some of this, is we're not allowing an opportunity to happen or a developer to come into this town. If we have to keep everything to a certain scale, we can't even go to 3 stories, correct? So I just think that the language is defining. I question if that's the right way to approach it. And I don't know what the right answer is, but I also think that I agree that there are specific areas that might merit a better missing middle, for sure. And I wish we would have brought the business park back into this equation, because I thought we had some really interesting conversations about it, and thinking out of the box, and having this opportunity that won't draw fear to people thinking that we're developing our quaint little town, that we could think that perhaps those are areas that we could, do a charrette or bring somebody in and show what could be. But
Well,
that-
actually,
that
it
12
get retained in the current draft, because the business park is listed under facilitate housing
Number 9,
diversity.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
your staff apparently
Right.
listened to that recommendation and put it in the draft. So, which I was glad it was there.
So there's interest in that idea then, we should leave it in.
I thought so.
Oh, yeah,
Okay,
I think so.
great.
And 13 says the same thing, right? 12 and 13, I'm jumping, we can go back to
No,
9,
that's
10,
fine.
11, but I was just saying that that was the same thing, that we're saying, keeping everything status quo, so I'm questioning that, that's all.
All I was going to add is that this conversation is perfectly teeing up your special meeting on March 7th.
Oh, we are?
You're so ready for it. So perfect.
That's
So perfect.
same thing.
Yeah.
Everyone be there.
Surprised is, along these same housing lines, is the affordable, that Aaron brought up, the term affordable housing isn't in here at all. And I'm assuming that's still a goal of the village. I mean, we're supposed to.
March 7th.
I didn't think, based upon that first presentation, that the missing middle really was affordable
I
housing.
think it can be, and it is in a lot of places. I think it's Lake Bluff's conversation, given the underlying, price of land here, makes that unrealistic almost, unless there's
Right.
some sort of,
How about relatively affordable?
it's relative. But it's more on the idea of diversifying housing stock and, how typologies, that's what the conversation is about missing here. I think the village has you're right, George, there is an affordable housing plan. It identifies properties, and you guys, I think, will have to talk about that some and see how those two integrated, and maybe that plan even becomes like an appendix to this document. It's not uncommon. But I think that plan properly acknowledges the difficulty in the economics.
And I'm hearing it referred to kind of as attainable housing besides affordable.
Yeah.
Attainable kind of factors in the dirt, the cost of the dirt, which is higher than in some places.
And you'll recall perhaps when we talked about the residential plan development, we talked about the difference between affordable housing and housing that's more affordable or attainable. When you say affordable housing, you touch a very specific button, right? Housing that is, and I remember Ben gave a detailed explanation, it's housing that is based on the income of potential buyers and it's set aside to be permanently as such. No, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about housing that is attainable or is more affordable. And the follow-up that Drew was mentioning that a lot of communities do, and if that's where the village wanted to go, could certainly be a recommendation of the plan, is to do a more detailed affordable housing plan. Thank you. But again, as Drew said, the underlying economics do not lend themselves to housing that is affordable in the strict HUD kind of definition of the term, short of some very active and energetic changes that we can talk about. But again, we've talked about it before and it did not seem like that was where we were going to go. We touched on 12 and 13. We'll go back to 10 and 11. Anything else on those? And again, the reason there is certain flexibility or overlap or discordance between some of them is because they're at the 30,000-foot level, but I think you make an excellent point.
I was questioning on
to
11,
clean
why we
those
even
up.
focused on.
I'm
why
sorry?
we just, on number 11 that you were just talking
Yeah.
about, why we even carved out, or specifically only included residential, why wouldn't the statement just be encourage the preservation and maintenance of historic assets and structures throughout the village?
All geographies? I would agree with that.
Yeah, I like that. Is that in keeping with the group?
In 10, why do you have North Terrace?
Off the top of my head, I don't remember, but if it's misguided, I'll put a line through it.
I mean, yeah, it just seems out of place.
Okay.
And I would prefer that it say "and businesses" at the end of the bold rather than light industrial plants. I don't really view us as having any industrial plants. It seemed like a strange, a more appropriate term would be business, as we otherwise don't even include that.
It's a historic term as we draw from previous plans, but you're right, businesses is much more appropriate.
Light manufacturing, would that be better? I mean, we do have some of that.
Just to make sure we haven't missed anything, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13 are all ones that we've had comments on. Are there other comments on those as statements or related to the geographies that we should narrow down again, where we were too
My only
broad?
question is, do we bring Park District into any of this? I mean, Park District assets or anything like that? Is there any reason to have that?
You know, all this talk of open space that's here and partnerships that are in the strategic actions really do that to the extent that it's necessary. We're not looking to do a park district plan, but we do want to acknowledge their role in the character of the community and the services that are provided. We generally don't go much further than that because they have their own set of actions.
We addressed it in 16.
To have
right?
them as a partner, for sure.
Well, yeah.
16, it's collaborate.
I'm right.
One exception to that is the beach is
Right.
listed in a handful of these, just because that is a unique area.
And back to number 13, that statement, I'm not sure why that just doesn't say all geographies, because we say ensure institutional, commercial, and residential development relates to its respective neighborhood.
And the connections.
And we've left out a couple of the geographies, why we left them out, like the West Terrace. I don't know why it wouldn't be all geographies, because that's a statement that would certainly
Right.
apply everywhere in the village.
I would agree. I was just wondering if it was listed just to asterisk some of them to, make them a priority, but, yeah, I did see, I missed that,
Or then we could list
The
all
West
of them and
Terrace is-
asterisk if
yeah.
you wanted to, yeah. But
14?
14, how do you define local and regional partners?
As broadly as humanly possible. I guess to put a kindred organizations, those groups that are working with or for the same constituents as the villages, like park districts, and everybody from the park district to IDOT, if you will.
Like Bluff lands, I mean, it's, sometimes that means like the municipal railroad for grants for overland management. When our interests align.
Right.
These could frankly be private organizations too. They could be private property owners. It could be, it can be open spaces and golf courses and.
And I'm wondering too, Mr. Blue, why in 14, say after open space or after forest, we don't just specify the golf course?
You can do that. Got it. Bless you.
Thank you.
And then, in terms of the geographies there, the other areas that we all listed are the primary areas with the natural resources, but the central business district is thrown in there, and that, it seemed to be an odd duck in that goal. Number 14, everything else is, it's the ravine areas, the Pure Acres,
Yeah.
Crabtree, natural corridor, recreation corridor, the beach, and then central business
Well,
district.
and if that's fine with everybody, that is, I mean, there's some paths and whatnot that link to the downtown, which was the idea behind it, but I hear what it's kind of, one of these things is not like the other feel to it, so I see what you're saying, and we could certainly take it out.
My guess on that one, though, is that it talks about open space, and The Village
Village
Green
Green.
may be.
Yeah, so, there's,
Reason for
it's
that.
not exactly the same, it just sounds different, but it does have those characteristics.
I mean, isn't our next agenda item kind of talking about our natural infrastructure being natural assets and forests, applying to the entire village? I mean, why are we specifying these particular geographies when we're actually changing our code to address the tree ordinance throughout the village? I mean, I would consider our trees natural assets.
Not to be reasonable, but yes.
And what about putting in public-private partnerships? Because I think that's going to count more. I mean, we've got the bridge going over the ravine that's essentially private partnership almost, public-private. I think that's going to be more important going forward. Just a category for them, in 14 anyway.
Let's give some thought to that, all geographies.
It might remind people to consider being a private partner.
$15? Or anything, I'm sorry, anything else on 14? 15?
I was wondering why it wasn't just all geographies. It seemed like that goal should apply everywhere.
Agreed.
To improve quality of place. That we picked some subdivisions and left out other subdivisions. West Terrace is there. Let's see, B&T is not there. But West
Yeah.
Terrace is, or East Terrace, well, I'm not sure
And
why we would pull out some of the areas for that type of general quality goal.
Yeah, again, being overly broad, I think that the ones about 176 corridor and central business district are really the biggest ones there. But it could, I could see doing either one, either is to focus it on the commercial gathering areas, or just have it be all geographies. I think it could be read either way. Again, we kind of split the baby here and maybe miss the boat a little bit, but I could see either one being logical, and would look to the group for your thoughts on it. More, less?
Inclusive, not exclusive, so I think just all geographies would get.
Okay, that's fine. That's what I was looking for. Thank you. Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
Yep.
We mentioned 16, but are there other,
Sunset Park should be Sunrise Park.
oops, thank you.
And I think there I'd also recommend that we identify the golf course after the recreation corridor. If you could, thank you.
Anything else on 16? Um, 17, thoughts? Again, it's got kind of an east side focus because of the trails and whatnot, but
Yeah, that would
I guess
probably
this is one of my Crabtree Farm goals that I didn't understand why Crabtree,
Right.
or wouldn't be in favor of Crabtree being in part of organizing new residential areas. It seems to imply that we want to break Crabtree up, and I just don't think the majority of residents want that jewel.
if that's the direction, then that's what we'll reflect.
Well, also, I have a question, because both Crabtree and Shore Acres are private roads that aren't encouraging people to come just wandering through and stuff. So on some of these where we're saying we want to, get the trails going through there or something, I don't know that we have that right, in a way.
Well, I wouldn't be opposed to a different goal that would be to pursue
Making them public?
trails, residential trails, but this is worded as if we're going to have a new residential area, that new residential areas, that isn't talking about trails and access.
No, but it could, I mean, I've worked in communities where they've done subdivisions and required like bridle pathway easements at the time of any subdivision to create a system of trails throughout. You can have a long-range plan that identifies corridors for, this is where you would want to do it, right? Identify it now, so when you do something.
Right.
Yeah.
So this could be anticipating a development on Crabtree that in 20 years, right?
If there is going to be development, it should do this. It's not necessarily saying that there should, but if.
We're not encouraging it. But there's some things that we-
You're thinking about what type of public amenities would you want to have in a development like that? You don't have to pick, the density. You can start talking very loosely, maybe future study but the idea of having amenities and trail systems, it can be a general statement like that, right? It doesn't have to be, 6 foot wide crushed limestone paths, around, you don't have to get that specific. That's the beauty of the plan. Crabtree has the same problem that Shore Acres has in terms of utility issues too, right? I mean, it's like,
Right.
there's other economic reasons why those things haven't developed yet, and it'd probably be a long time.
Drew, is there ever a reason for or against having public roads go private?
Generally,
I mean, I'm sorry, the
village doesn't
opposite,
want to-
having private roads go public, sorry.
If it serves a purpose, usually if it's like trying to bring a utility or like water
Right.
sewer or something, that's when you usually see it happen. If they're trying to, it closes a gap and gets service, utility service to places. That's where I've seen it happen. The issue is typically those roads aren't built to village standards.
Right.
And they're substandards, so there's
Okay.
expense, when you think about
Right.
private roads, they're not built to the same
Right.
curb and gutter.
Emergency, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I just wondered whether there was any reason to be open to that concept, that we don't have that many.
Situational, yeah, you know what I mean? It could be for delivering a public safety services too, right? We want access to here to provide those services, and can't do that today. So.
Right, okay.
What do we end up with as far as geographies in 17? Should it be all? I know it should not be all.
I mean, if we're just envisioning any development at all needing these particular things, cycling and trail connections, then perhaps it would be better just to say all geographies and not specify particularly Crabtree.
Right, there are other 8 and 9 acre lots down on Green Bay. That the old Wacker property right at the south end is 9 acres. That could get broken up. The Litzinger parcel just above that, the 8 acres, 9 acres, that could get broken up. So there's a place off of Moffett that's 7 acres. That could get broken up. So it would be better to, I agree, to just list all geographies.
Any
'cause there's-
geography in
there
a
are-
residential
There
area.
are potential.
I'm seeing nods. Is that the consensus? I think
Yes.
you say be inclusive rather than exclusive, so that's, okay.
Or areas of annexation, where, that's a potential in the next 20 years as well, so.
And just to clarify, is that all geographies or all residential, just because 17 seems to be
Well,
specific?
maybe we should get rid of new residential and just say organize areas into connected neighborhoods.
I would assume neighborhoods would refer to residential areas, right, so. We'd have to totally rework that if we want to get rid of residential, I would think. I mean, I think that's a valid goal throughout the village, whether it's residential, business, I think encouraging cycling and trail connections throughout the village, I think would be enough of a goal.
And this one really focused on those new subdivisions. If you look down a couple, I shouldn't have taken my glasses off. 19 talks about bikeability and active transit. You know, that's sort of the umbrella. This one was a little bit more specific toward the residential ones, in
residential.
part because of what Drew had said.
Sure, understood.
So I'd look for these to I mean, we could say all residential geographies, but like the idea of this one focusing on neighborhoods, and a lot of times there's a question of, gee, should we let people come through, or how do we let come through? Again, I'm repeating what Drew had said, but the idea of 17 here is to encourage that biking as part of geography, as part of neighborhoods. So I would suggest, if it's all right, that we talk about it being all residential geographies rather than all of them.
I guess 18 does address that some too, just a variety of mobility options, which I wouldn't.
And again,
assume would include
30,000 square feet, so there's going to be overlap, and they're going to touch on different areas, so yeah, that's why you see it that way. Anything else with 17? Again, my suggestion here is we talk about residential geographies rather than all. If that's okay, we can move to 18 and ask if there's any,
That's fine.
any comments or corrections there.
No.
19?
19, I thought we should maybe add non-vehicular
Nice.
transportation, or however you want to phrase it, but,
Non-motorized?
or non-motorized.
I had to look up what active transportation meant. I Googled it, and it
What-
came up non-motorized.
Non-motorized.
Is that what, was that the intention, non-motorized? I think more people understand that term.
Active transportation is becoming that, well, there's an active transportation group that's making it better known, but yeah, we can go with non-motorized.
Address the transportation as well, scooters and.
Yeah, well, it's in here.
It's in there somewhere.
It is in here. Number 20 about the off-street parking, and again, this was drawn broadly and includes some areas that may at some time see new development, but, you know, we could narrow that down. Again, there's a couple in here that you may take issue with. I'm glad to cross those off, but the idea is about flexible parking solutions.
Do we envision a parking lot at the beach someday? Other than the 3 spaces that we have down there?
No,
I don't know if we want to.
not unless Drew hits the Powerball Friday and donates it all to the village.
So noted, thank you.
Yeah, do we strike natural corridor and recreation corridor also?
Yeah. Yeah. I was just thinking about how we might redraw it, but yeah, I like that.
Just leave it at the 176, the commercial corridors in the central business district and the business park. We weren't really,
Yeah, we can do that.
rather than, if we're going to start listing residential areas, it's
Just
kinda
have
tough
one, we're not gonna do-
divide one from the other.
Yeah, let's go with those 3, I like that. Anything we missed on any of these 30,000-foot fundamental goals?
Probably not for today, but
This is always an evolving process. Like I said, what we want to know is if we're on the right direction, so that as we keep going, we're following your direction rather than going off somewhere. So appreciate this depth and focus here. Move on to the specific actions?
yeah, fine with me.
So the first set at the bottom of what is page 5 in your memo talks about community character and urban design, or just community design. And again, this goes back to what I had said before. Some of these, and this applies to all of these, some of these are active things to go out and do. that the village would undertake. Some of them are more along the lines of things to actually physically install, and some of them are about preserving. So again, let's do the same thing we just did with the fundamental goals, is to go through them and talk in terms of the statements themselves and the geographies they address. Yes?
I felt the first one should address, it's applicable to all geographies in my view. Because you talk about both residential and commercial structures, I don't know why we would pull out just a few isolated areas in the village and not include them. Just seemed like it's
Okay.
it's a very worthy goal and action to pursue. And why would we exclude an area to not have
Now, so let me ask the question
scale
this.
and architectural?
Let me ask the question this beg of us, which is that, in terms of whether or not we want to go to design standards for very specific design standards for single-family homes, rather than the design standards for residential being along the lines, say, of the missing middle stuff that you're going to be talking about. But is looking at the design of new single-family homes something that we're at all interested in?
I'm not sure it's within our purview, but I'm not sure that's for us to decide.
There's a town south of here, not naming names, that does that. Most communities do not.
If we have an extra year. Boy, that's a huge topic.
Why don't we focus on commercial then? For the purpose of the plan. Again, these things are in here just tossed out to ask you a question,
And
that's
also
why I
maybe-
ask.
So the other question is the word guidelines or standards the right words? Because you could have a community that puts out guidelines, but it's not a requirement. You can also be a community that says, we are going to do design review of every single home. And they're two very different things. And so the word guide, so part of it is just what you mean by guideline.
The other opportunity here is for this recommendation to be about going back and looking at zoning standards for residential. Again, we did this with RPD a little bit, but, and again, I'm just picking examples out of the air that I've seen in other communities where, where a porch, whether covered or not, doesn't count towards FAR because there's a desire to encourage porches, right? That in and of itself is, a design guideline for residential. So it doesn't have to be design review of new residential homes like a couple other communities do, but as written, that would probably be about the direction we'd take it.
You're saying it, I'm sorry, I misunderstood your last comment there. You're saying that as this is written now, you would interpret that to be that it would go towards having review of every single family?
No.
Oh, no, okay.
Could be interpreted that way, though. If that's the direction that this board or whatever board wants to take.
I'm hearing and seeing nods that we don't want to do that, and this should be revised so that it's clear that that's not where we're going.
But you also mentioned that just having the porch allowance satisfies that statement, right? I mean,
Right.
that is design guidelines, right? By giving allowances for porches. Technically, we are guiding by encouraging.
Okay.
I think I underlined maintain the scale again. I think when reviewing the business park, it could be a little premature. I think, when we're talking about commercial structures, to maintain the scale and architectural language of neighborhoods, when we're still trying to really question what that neighborhood potentially can be.
So maintain might not be the right word, because we might want to, depending on what
Right.
comes out of the conversation
Just
about.
question that word maintain.
Oh, okay.
Good.
Compliment.
Okay, good, that was good. Other thoughts on that one?
Is that all geographies?
That was
Yeah.
the suggestion, and that's what I put in my notes, if that's all right with everybody. Cool.
You got maintain again in number 2. But maintain the identity this time, so I think that we can keep.
Or how about we just leave I had marked it up, just the first part, continue to promote and communicate preservation incentives for historic structures, period. All geographies,
That's good.
that's what we're trying to do.
I'm seeing enough nods to make that change. Is that all right with everybody?
Perfect.
I'm sorry,
Historic, can you change cottages to structures, period,
historic structures.
and then delete the rest of
And do all geography.
the statement, and then all geographies instead of half the areas.
Good.
And I thought number 3 was repetitive.
Yes, no. I
Strike
mean,
number
the
3 then,
the
George?
idea is to say, I mean, this is sort of what hasn't happened in the past, is that when there is a historic estate that gets built, is that to the extent that is a home on there or a principal home on there, that there be efforts to preserve it. Stonebridge tore it down, right? I'm remembering that correctly?
Yeah.
And the idea here is to try and preserve those structures, like was done in, what do you call it, in Armor Woods, right? Where there was the building that was maintained.
And so why aren't we really saying that in this number 2? Continue to promote and communicate preservation incentive for historic structures, the way we changed it. It just, I mean, we can say it again in number 3.
It's applicable,
Just
but
trying-
not as specific, but since it's something that may specifically happen, we listed it twice. If you feel that it's enough that it's in there once, we can take out number 3. Again, I'm okay either way, I just wanted to be clear that message gets through the plan if we take out number 3.
How strong do we want to be with it, right? Because
Oh, there's a better way to say it.
2 is promote and communicate incentives, but 3 is, we're going to preserve. Which we can't do, anyway, right? We
What about encourage preservation of historic
can't
estate?
deny a demolition permit, so we just delay it. So unless we change, we can't outright preserve historic estate homes if the owner doesn't.
Is it something that we might see incentivizing with perhaps a density bonus to grant another couple of units for preserving something like that? That's the thinking behind the wording in number 2, is to consider maybe there are some incentives which ultimately become density bonuses. Not huge density bonuses, but, I've been in communities where it was kind of a one-for-one thing. You keep this structure, you get to build another one. It's not to try and change the ultimate overall density. Is that kind of in keeping with where you see these future developments being logical? So I guess what I'm saying is I'm of a mind to keep 2 and 3, but there's a case to be made for eliminating 3 because it's covered by 2 and deferring to the group.
I'm okay keeping 3.
I'm sorry.
I said I'm okay keeping 3.
Oh, okay.
Just to-
Just include all geographies
All
again?
geographies,
This idea of I'm moving on to number 4, if that's all right. The idea of the overhead lines came up a couple of times through the engagement and through discussions. I know that burying utility lines is complicated, not always a good idea, not everybody's favorite, and ridiculously expensive. The reason we put ideas like that in plans is if there's an opportunity to get somebody to do it, or to get a grant to do it with somebody else's money, the best money there is, that's why it's in here. Thoughts on that one?
I'm comfortable with that. I guess it'd probably be all geographies again, but
I don't know why we would limit ourselves to.
Yeah, okay. We tried to pick where they are, but yeah, okay, let's do all. I like that.
We tried years ago on 176 when they were doing some work on the electric unit, and we struck out, but
Yeah, I think that's why.
It was worth a
I
try.
think that's why it came up as we went through the process.
Drew, I think I asked you a number of years ago, and then it was $1 million a mile.
Twice that.
Like I said, this is
That was
a,
in Peter Cummins' day as village administrator, that it was over $1 million for 176. And that was in the 80s.
should we strike visual? Because there are other adverse impacts of having overhead lines.
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Power outages.
Yeah,
We can strike visual. It doesn't eliminate visual, it just makes it broader.
right.
I'm all in on that. Thoughts about number 5? Again, these are some urban design ideas that we have clients and we see communities do in terms of advancing identity. I mean, there's an established identity here, and some towns do it further in terms of streetlights. You know who I'm talking about, and wayfinding signs and street signs and stuff like that. So that's the idea to put in here. And again, I would remind everybody, for all of these things, as they become recommendations of the plan, these are not do all of these now kind of things. There's not enough staff, there's not enough money, there's not enough capacity, there's not enough time in the world to do all these things now. These are things that over time, and well, I usually suggest people do it, say at budget time, that the village look at these and go, you know, this has been an idea for a while. Let's look at in more depth at doing this. So as Drew works out his work program for the coming years and the budget is done, these things are sort of reminders to think about doing this. So I just want to be clear, this is not a community of dramatic or instant change. Most places are not. So that's not the intent here, but this is something that, these are ideas that might happen over time.
I had 2 questions on number 5 with this. Are we actually recommending that we light all our paths? I mean, I know there are certain areas that have been discussed about lighting the path from the middle school back to the train station and through the underpass area with better lighting, but is this actually a recommendation to light all our paths, like the path all the way up to the north end of the village along Sheridan Road? Is that's the way it reads to me. I don't understand.
Yeah, I would say no, and like when I think places like you're describing that are more purposefully non-eliminated, or that, to me, that's part of identity, that's who we are, and so that's reinforcing identity. Some of those you would not eliminate on purpose, but others you would. And when you drive around one Bluff and look, you know, like the street lights are not, they're usually just at the intersection, right? We're kind of, as you know, we're like, there's not a lot of regulatory signs, there's not a lot of street lights.
I try not to overuse the phrase, because you could use it on almost every one, but a lot of times we talk about where appropriate, right? So and I realize it says throughout, so it gives that implication of every single one, right? And maybe this is one where we look to change the throughout language, or maybe add a where appropriate. I think that's a nice point. You had another?
No, that was
Okay.
all one comment there. So, yeah, I would agree with, I would feel better where appropriate. I just don't think the way it reads, path lighting throughout the village, I just can't imagine lighting all our paths and trails.
Bit much.
Or you
And
could
even
say,
why we want
instead
to-
of say to improve user safety and reinforce character, you could say to balance safety and character.
Just don't want to put down actions that are totally unattainable.
But it's situational, right?
Yeah.
Not just unattainable,
Sometimes you
but
put your finger on the thumb for
undesirable.
safety issues.
Or desirable, right.
And Michael, on that one, is consistent also referring to like the fixture type as opposed to just having a consistent amount? Was that an intent of that?
I didn't hear the very first part.
Is deploying consistent street and or path lighting, was that talking about like the fixture type as well? Or is it just, I don't know if you know where that one was like getting at, if it was kind of both
I guess
that.
this is a where appropriate again, but I would say yes, but not that every fixture is necessarily the same throughout the village. It might just be main roads, for instance, or it could be certain residential areas. But yeah, fixtures is a way the communities do this, and that we've helped people with. So yes. Cool. Anything else on 5?
Just a comment that there is a group trying to reduce the amount of street and path lighting.
True.
As dark as things are,
Yes. So,
Yes,
Just so everyone is
you're right,
aware.
important to acknowledge the dark skies notion about not, yeah.
Attorneys.
we can bring Michael back to referee that one when the time comes.
I might have an opinion about it, so I might not be a good referee, just saying. Although we're far enough away. Anyway. Number 6 is about wayfinding. I'm sure you've seen these signs in different kinds of communities. There's some, but the idea of building on the village's brand and logo to start including some signs that start to talk about the central business district and direct you to business areas is something that helps advance identity and helps do a little bit of economic development. Thoughts on 6?
Seems reasonable.
Okay. 7?
Would it be all geographies again, Michael?
No, because I wouldn't, and we should probably narrow the list. Again, we've made the mistake of being broader rather than narrower. So, the idea of Green Bay Road is why some of these neighborhoods are on here. But I wouldn't say all geographies because you wouldn't put them in neighborhoods, for instance. So perhaps this list of geographies even needs to be narrowed further because the ones that are here are the ones that are close to some of these major main roads that we do. Maybe we list these as the business areas and corridors. I'll have to think about that.
Yeah, maybe strike the rest of the neighborhoods.
Or just say along trail corridors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Number 7. Again, this is looking to maintain the open space that enhances the character of the community. That's why there's probably more neighborhoods listed on here than there should be, but it's the same sort of ideas to preserve what's here. I mean, driving through the village, there's that open space corridors, you go up and down Sheridan and maintaining that. Even if it happens as part of new development, it can be preserved. We've seen designs for areas that do that, but that's the idea on 7. And again, maybe the geographies are a little off and we can refine that if somebody has a suggestion. Would appreciate any thoughts there.
unless we start buying up the homes on 176 and the North Terrace, I don't see the open space on that, in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and again, the idea is not to expand or buy anything, but to keep what's there as you get proposals for development.
We just don't have any, right?
Or just don't
It's
have any, yeah.
developed. It's developed.
It is, right.
So, unless we buy them and knock them down, I don't see the North Terrace having
Okay,
open space buffer on 176.
This is one where instead of, listing all these neighborhoods that seem to add to confusion, why we can't, in a case like this, just as we did above, to just say along the routes listed as your italics thing, rather than, listing Crabtree, and then you go, what does that really apply to?
If Crabtree is developed, I think.
we're gonna be a little less rigid in this geography thing as we move forward. I think we're hearing that, aren't we? Okay. We started with a matrix. Y'all will love the matrix, but that's how we kind of got started. Anything else with the character and design, either on the specific statements or the concepts generally?
No, I think we made tremendous progress.
Wow, this is great. Thank you. I really appreciate everybody digging in like this. Economic development.
I'm gonna need to leave soon. So
You're the youngest one here.
I also have to get up at 4 in the morning. So unless anybody else is going to work at 4:30 tomorrow morning, I'm happy to let the rest of you continue, but I also would be happy to move.
This is not the last chance you'll have to look at this. If you
Continue
have
another
anything
day.
that you want to send, please do, but appreciate,
This gives you red lines.
yeah.
The problem is, everyone has different red lines. How do you reach it? We still have a quorum. I mean, we can continue on with 4
Well, and
people.
that's why I said, there's not, this is not the last chance to look at these. And if there's something that really sticks in your craw that we really missed, let us know. Not so much to ask you to rewrite the whole thing, but if there's something that is a red flag, let us know, and we'll see how it fits in with what everybody else said. And if it has to come back to everybody as a question, we can do that too.
If anything, can we take a pause on this discussion and get to the tree and while Aaron's still here and come back?
Yep, absolutely.
Sure.
Pause.
Pause.
Thank you for accommodating me, but
Oh, no.
I worked last night and go back to work tomorrow morning, so.
The youth of today.
Too much work.
Okay, so
We used to walk miles through the snow.
Uphill both ways.
Barefoot.
moving to item 6 on the agenda, our proposed zoning text amendments. As you may recall, the village was recently awarded an urban and community forestry grant through the Morton Arboretum, and that includes the Chicago Region Trees Initiative, the CRTI. The $25,000 grant will assist the village with the updated tree inventory, which is at this point complete, and street tree trimming, which is in progress. As part of the grant requirements, municipalities are required to adopt a tree preservation and protection ordinance. Because the village already has extensive tree requirements, only a handful of minor text amendments are required. And these text amendments have been approved by the Morton Arboretum CRTI group to meet the grant requirements.
Do we have to swear in? Who presents? Drew? Staff?
Yeah, so I didn't necessarily make a PowerPoint for this, but just if you turn to the section in your packet, there's a little chart that the Morton Arboretum group put together showing that these text amendments, along with our existing language, will meet the grant requirements. And then there's also a section just talking about what the specific text amendments are. So for the first one, related to 10-11-1, this is simply putting in that the protection of as the objective, the protection of trees as a valuable community resource and integral part of community infrastructure also accomplishes the following objectives, and then lists the same objectives. It's just listing trees as community infrastructure. The next one is probably kind of the most extensive change, I would say, out of all of these, and that's 10-11-2. And it just adds in that public trees, with those, the village forester has the authority and responsibility to plant, prune, maintain, and remove trees and woody plants growing in or upon all municipal-owned properties. All trees on public property shall be planted and maintained in accordance with the tree care standards and nursery stock standards, which we will get to with the next text amendments. Any contractor performing maintenance on a protected public tree must A, be supervised by a certified arborist, and B, maintain liability and workers' compensation insurance. This is something that was required by the Morton Arboretum group as part of the grant. We double-checked. They said that was basically the minimum that they would allow. They typically would try to kind of even have us go above and beyond that, but this would meet our current contracted work that we have in place, the requirements of that. And then, in the definition section for 10-11-3, this really isn't changing much. It's more just kind of a slight rearrangement and then an update to be in compliance with what's actually being used in practice, which are the most up-to-date standards. So instead of specifically calling out the national pruning standards as we do now, we're updating the tree care standards to include those because the ANSI A300 standards would be what would be considered for both of those now. That's something that the Morton Arboretum suggested. And then the nursery stock standards, that is just updating it. The one that we had in our current code referenced the 1990 edition, but in practice, we're using the most up-to-date. And then just the small section in the pruning definition would be changed to the tree care standards, which is now inclusive of the pruning standards as well. And then that same sort of change can be found in the last zoning text amendment, which is in 10-11-6, just changing national pruning to tree care, which again is inclusive of the national pruning standards. So those are the text amendments that the Morton Arboretum group and the village together has come up with to meet those grant requirements.
Thank you, Ms. Gable. Any discussion? Hearing none, is there a motion, I guess?
Members of the public?
Yeah.
For the tape?
Oh, yeah, we better close the public hearing.
I move to recommend to the village board to adopt the proposed text amendments.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none? We could have a vote, please?
Yes. Member Danley?
Aye.
Member Fisher?
Aye.
Member Russell?
Aye.
Member Toll?
Aye.
And Chair Peters?
Aye.
All right.
All right, thank you. Reverting back to agenda item number 5.
So, excuse me.
Thanks, Aaron.
Get a good night's sleep.
I heard. Oh, didn't last night.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks so much.
Should we set a cutoff at 10?
It's up to you guys.
Okay with me.
Should we set a cutoff at 10, Michael, if,
Your call, you don't scare me. My record is doing this for 3.5 hours and finishing at 11:30, so it's your call, Mr. Chair.
I think we've gone beyond that in the past, so, but we don't want to set that record.
My record's 2 AM,
Oh, now it's a contest.
and your old stopping grounds.
On Prospect? No? No.
Experience.
Yeah, I figured.
The high school,
What was it?
the high school.
Anyway, 10 o'clock,
Well, let's see if we're almost there at 10,
we'll press through.
yeah.
That's fine, and I do appreciate this. Like I said, I didn't know that the group was not clear the group would have the interest of doing this, or maybe deal with this later, so this is real helpful, and I appreciate everybody's time.
No, thank you.
And I, like I said, in the interest of time, I'll try and push this along. If I push too fast on something, slow me down, okay? Deal?
Yes.
Great. Economic development. Just in general, you know, this one focuses, this first one focuses on the business park. And there's a couple of options in here that kind of can find their way or be interpreted. But the idea of being open to the redevelopment idea that we saw for the business park is something that I heard there's some interest in maintaining a notion of. This section, this economic development section, is more about enhancing and preserving business park and keeping those spaces available. I would just add parenthetically that I know there's a lot of emphasis in the world today about these big 300,000 square foot warehouses. The market also sees a lot of emphasis in 5 to 15,000 to 10,000 square foot spaces for startup businesses and such. So the world is not all about warehouses. So that's kind of our mindset in advancing this. So with that as intro, thoughts about number 1?
Okay,
Yeah, I was comfortable with it.
2?
okay. I'm assuming you're going to go back and plop in that 41 Carter as applicable into all of these commercial list, where there's many items where we list the 3 different commercial areas, and I think we agreed at the beginning to break out the 41 Carter.
That was a comment. Is the group comfortable with that? Because that's all right by us.
Yeah, I just was assuming since we agreed to the new area, we would drop it in where appropriate.
Okay. Number 3 is pretty specific, but something that came up through the discussion.
Can you explain that? What is the self-storage tax to increase employment density?
And I think staff probably knows more about it than I do, but I would tell you that it was an idea to add either a cost to this that provides some benefit and revenue to the village or discourages the use so that more space is available for what we've talked about in 1 and 2. Is that fair?
The 3, the self-storage.
Yeah.
I think that there was a user that came in
For a larger building that was right by Target, and the idea is it wouldn't have been nice if that was something that was not, was a bigger employer, people that would come and eat here or shop here, versus just, storage like that. And so the idea was trying to, do we want to incent or disincentivize other types of uses? It's probably a finer level of specificity than at this high level, but.
Yeah.
I mean, my recommendation would be on the self-storage thing to remove the word tax.
disincentivize self-storage uses, something like that.
Well, what if we talk about evaluating opportunities to focus on employment uses?
I think that's more broad, which is probably good, because, I mean, there's 2 issues, one of which is the self-storage tax. I don't know that we have the authority to do it, but if we could look at, if you want us to look at that, we can, but I would hate that to be in for the next 20 years in your code when we're limited on what we can do with taxing authority anyway. So that seems kind of like a binary, either you can or you can't thing. So, but I think, as Michael indicated, if it's, to broaden this, I think is more appropriate for a comprehensive plan. The other issue with self-storage is it's kind of often a zoning question too. Is it, if it's something that you think is inappropriate to have self-storage, you could just decide tomorrow to
Not allow it.
amend your code. So,
And again, we tried to pick up the comment, but I think, Ben, what you're saying is a better approach, and I would suggest that to the group.
no, maybe, and if the idea is to increase employment diversity, maybe it's continually study the uses that are allowed in certain zoning districts to make sure that they remain uses that encourage employment density. So over a 20-year period, there's plenty of things that are, uses change, and you always want to maintain that employment density. So, you can approach it that way as well.
That's more evergreen, I like that. Is that all right with the group?
Yeah.
Yep.
Number 4 is about partnering with something that's in the works.
So I was wondering why, once the interchange is built, why, and if we decide we want to acquire a piece of property out there, why would we talk to IDOT, other than if they own that parcel. What's the real purpose of saying to coordinate? I mean, this is talking about after it's been reconstructed, right?
Well, that's a good point. This is focused on before and continuing the coordination that goes on currently.
I mean, because we've already, the planning has all been done, the design, final design is underway. It's, the decision where it's going is done. It's not changing unless there's a major blow up. So we're talking about redeveloping or possibly acquiring property near the interchange. I'm just confused.
So the
why we
ship
would
has
need-
sailed is
Why
what
would
you,
we need IDOT unless it's an IDOT-owned parcel?
It will be. There's certain, so like in the northwest corner, there is an area that's identified that of property they need to acquire for a best management practice for stormwater. That could be relocated to make the property more, a better property for redevelopment.
Okay. Makes sense.
does that work then?
Yes.
So the economic development ones were kind of focused, but the next group, I did this a little out of order for the presentation for your, just because it fit better, but the next one in your notes is environment and sustainability. Thank you, Clara. So I guess all I would say in terms of this is that you will see the words wetlands, open space, ravines, kind of over and over again as areas of emphasis. And again, the geographies might be off because these might be broader rather than focused, which is what we tried to do. But with that as lead-in, thoughts about the first one?
Why is the beach in there?
Oh,
I
sorry.
don't think, when I understand along the East Skokie drainage ditch in the north of the sanctuary, there's that huge wetland area. But I just don't think it's feasible to establish a wetland between the base of the bluff and the water in our
Yeah.
very, very narrow.
No, we had something broader in mind, but I think that's a good point. We'll take that out if that's okay with the group. I like that. Thank you.
And then we are actually, my flag, Crabtree Farm, flood storage in Crabtree.
I mean,
I-
it's a question for the group, right, in terms of whether or not, what the long-term possibility is here.
Take it out.
Yeah, I have the same concerns about
Okay.
recreation corridor, Tangley Oaks Sanctuary, natural corridor. It seems to me if we identify specific parcels, we're encouraging stormwater-related activity in those parcels.
Yeah.
How about just ending that third line with to manage stormwater and provide habitat as applicable, or where applicable, and not identifying?
Is that acceptable to the group?
One of those words?
One of those words. I like that, though, because that's the right way to do it. I appreciate that. And then we can avoid the specificity of the groups. Number two is something that came up through the engagement that sounded interesting, that we wanted to float and hear what folks thought about it. We've not investigated it much further than this, but are wondering about thoughts and insights on it.
Sounds like a good idea. It's a huge open space area, and they're supposed, I think the county's 5-year plan is to develop a trail along 137. So if it's it would provide a link between the sanctuary and up north to 137. I think that's in their
think.
plan.
Yeah, I think.
Okay.
It's extraterritorial. Just so we can.
And it's all to work with. But that's a good point. Rain gardens are a stormwater tool, and they're attractive, and they clean water, and they do all sorts of good things. And we do work with communities that look for opportunities to install them in their own right-of-ways, both to manage stormwater and serve as an example to business and residential property owners. So that's where this notion comes from.
I was more concerned about the language when repaving streets. It made it sound like it would be a village project. I mean, if a homeowner wants to introduce a rain garden in the parkway in the front of their home, with a village permit, I would think we would encourage them and let them do that. I'm also concerned, I have a big exclamation point, harmful to parkway trees if people start excavating depressions for rain gardens in the narrow parkway. I mean, it sounds really nice, but the notion of putting rain gardens between the sidewalk and the street, and that's actually going to make a difference. We could carve out a half-acre hole in the natural area behind the water plant and store more water than we could with 1,000 rain gardens. But if we want, I guess it's okay. I don't mind leaving it, but we should change it to have the village allow a homeowner to do it with, provided it's appropriate, but not that the village would be constructing them as part of repaving streets. That, the way it's worded, it's.
So let's get rid of that connection to the paving of the streets, is what you're
We'd
saying.
upset more people if we told them part of their front lawn was going to become a rain garden, and then we would be maintaining it if we built it, and just
Okay, and it's
allow a private
got that where feasible language in there, so. And are the geographies again an issue, because there might be other areas that this could happen? I mean, we can broaden a lot of these to relate to all geographies, and it seems this might be one where that's appropriate, if that's what you're thinking?
that's what I had marked,
See, I'm learning to anticipate.
Or all residential as a possibility.
I like that.
Michael, if I may, going back to number 1,
Yes, sir.
the word "in partnership with Lake County" troubles me. I guess it just troubles me with respect to how they handled the golf course scenario. And I'm not sure that was a partnership, but it sure cost tremendous resources from a time and money perspective for what basically was an unjustifiable endeavor.
Would we be more comfortable if we took out the specific mention of the county and left it as partners?
I have much more trust personally with the environmental organizations, Labola and LaFola and all that stuff.
We mentioned the county because, the county's got stormwater connection, but to take it out so that it's not highlighted is certainly doesn't change the intent here. So if that's something that the group's comfortable with, we'll do that.
Well, I think the difficulty is the SMC provides funds for.
Well, that's what I was saying, is that, there was specific connection.
There are regional partners
Yeah.
to provide stormwater. I mean, they set the rules, we're with them.
Well, I have my own personal thoughts about that scenario.
They're the agent.
On the viaduct project, they've been an exceptional partner on the viaduct, the new tunnel project.
And that's why they're in here. I'd leave it, is what I'm saying. I hear what you're saying, that there was a bad experience, but they are a key partner in this.
Well, wouldn't they fall under the umbrella of environmental organizations, the stormwater agency? To make it a
Go
little.
back to that partners, we talked about it very early on one of the first slides, about partners. You know, I guess it's more of a generic, it can be public and private partners. I think it's hard to ignore the SMC, but I mean, I also think you can be inclusive here, and when you get more specific sites, you can say your piece then.
What if I said in partnership with environmental agencies and organizations? Just trying to strike a compromise here, team.
Appreciate it.
1, 2, 3, anything else in those? Again, I said I would press on, but I don't want to miss anything. 4 is about more partners and these notions of runoff and stormwater management.
Once again, I didn't think the beach was a appropriate location for a
Okay.
rain garden.
I hear that. Anything else on 4?
Maybe the other missing residential areas that aren't in there for whatever reason.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of them not in there, only a couple of them.
Okay.
Or unless you've tried to find where there's a park district parcel, maybe that's what you were trying to do.
Right.
District
Fine.
65.
We need to see partner with other institutional users.
Belforet should be in there, Belforet neighborhood. If you're gonna, or just all applicable geographies, maybe. It's so hard to go down that whole list of geographies and decide which one
Okay.
works and which one doesn't.
All right.
How about partner to construct rain gardens on, you know, just cut out the, trying to name everybody?
Yeah.
That sounds good.
Partners generally, got it. Yeah, that's a good approach. I like that. So something that we see happen in commercial areas is if somebody is repaving or resurfacing a parking lot is to talk with them when they come in or encourage them, or, you know, one could even incentivize, but I don't see going that far, to look at reducing paved areas or using other techniques that reduce stormwater runoff, permeable asphalt, things like that. I know those things have their challenges, and we generally don't recommend that they be used to count towards a stormwater management tool, because you have to vacuum them every year, basically. But if somebody wants to come in and manage it properly, the idea here is that it's something that the village is open to. So 5's all right? Thoughts, changes? 6? We've talked about cluster development in residential areas.
Well,
And I
here's my
know we're going to hear about
Crabtree
Crabtree, I know we're going to hear about Crabtree Farm, so, yeah, and again, this is not recommending or directing a change there. It's saying that over time, if there's a change, this would be an area for it. If it's crossed off of here, it doesn't mean that it doesn't apply, but it doesn't highlight it, and I think, Commissioner Russell, that's the point you've been trying to make, and if that's, the group is comfortable with that, I certainly don't have a problem with it.
It maybe use the term possible or appropriate or something like that, encourage possible cluster
Oh,
development.
yeah, okay.
Because we've got the B&T district has those 2 9-acre estates on the other side of the road. Wacker and Litzinger, the Kinsel property, so you have to put, you do have Belforet there, but
Okay. All right, so I think that where appropriate language fits into number 6, and we can take out Crabtree. Again, not to say that it would never happen there, but it would still be applicable. So that's 6. 7?
Is there any reason to pull out, to put in the park district since they own one of the ravine systems? I mean, there's a park and a ravine, or just somehow add them into it?
6,
7.
7.
7.
they're in East Lake Bluff.
Pardon?
Their map has Ravine Park in the middle of East Lake Bluff, so
Okay, okay.
it seems like it's covered.
I screwed up the number.
So seven's,
It's 7 in your list, it's 8 up there.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at 7 here.
When it carried over, it changed the numbering. So number 7 is number 8 here, but number 7 was the one you were asking about adding the Park District, right?
Just partner with Park District where appropriate or something.
Anything else on number 7 on your sheet? Number 8, 9 up here, but 8 on your sheet is again looking to these partners.
if we're going to list Crabtree under this one, which I don't have as much heartburn with this statement, but then we should list Shore Acres. I mean, there's a lot of areas of ecological significance, I think, along the shoreline, and
Okay. Any other
East Lake
thoughts?
Bluff, there is a 7-acre, what do we consider large? I mean, there is in East Lake Bluff along the lake off Moffett, there's a 7-acre parcel that's on the lake and separated by 2 ravines, so it's 111 Moffett is the address.
Got it. Okay. Number 9 on your sheet, how about partnering with agencies about infrastructure?
Okay.
And again, this is not going to be possible everywhere about usable open space, but the idea is that to the extent some agency is talking about doing a stormwater project, we always hate to see stormwater projects, you know, heaven forbid, be concrete pits, but if they're going to be green as they should be, is there an opportunity for open space? It's a question to ask when your partners are talking about doing these things. Number, yeah, 10 here, 9 on your page.
Have an accessible open space component.
So if there's going to be development or redevelopment, that we essentially ask the question of where can there be open space as part of it. Doesn't mean that it'll be possible. And again, I don't want to add where possible to every single paragraph, but it's sort of implied in the plan. Number 10 on your sheet, number 9 up here.
11 up there.
Right, that's what I meant. Thank you. 10 on the sheet, 11 up there. I apologize. The state has made some modest requirements regarding EV stations or EV charging for single-family homes and multifamily. We're seeing towns go a little further than that in terms of requiring it for zoning. So this is a question as to whether or not that's an environmental action that we look at considering. Again, this doesn't automatically make the change or amend the zoning ordinance or anything. This is just a question of, is this an environmental action that we would consider?
Would it be better at this point to say in the village's codes, not knowing where the regulations
More
are,
zoning.
as opposed to the zoning code? It's,
Yeah.
We've almost brought you a text amendment pretty recently, in fact, to talk about EV, like creating a pathway for EV charging stations to have a kind of a cleaner path for design review, maybe only design review, if it, like, in certain areas that they started saying, we're gonna start setting aside, 20% of the parking in the CBD, well, that would have a big impact, right? But it doesn't matter as much on the west side as it does here, so we're like, we didn't bring that yet. So we were kicking that around. But that's kind of the stuff that we're talking about, because, there's a building code.
so at this point, it's better just to say village's codes then, right? As opposed,
Local regulation.
I've changed it to village code, which is as all-encompassing as it can get. So the last one, numbering aside, This is a question about whether or not there is interest in considering, and again, the way you've considered other text amendments, density bonuses for these and other kinds of environmental.
Remind me of the PRD conversation we had about public amenities.
Yes. And for what it's worth, LEED is a tough one to do because you don't get the LEED certification until after you build the thing, but, you know, it's a sort of thing where we've seen towns that have incentives for that. But again, a potential density bonus, for instance, which there are other ways the village can incentivize things. You can waive building permit fees. We don't have to be specific about density, but that's what we chose here to put forth as an idea. We very much want to hear what the group thinks about that.
The implication being consider increased density allowances?
Yes.
Or, that's my,
They don't have to be
that goes
dramatic.
along with my whole line of opposition to.
This is why we ask.
Let's squish them together, so let's build 3 times as many. You know, what happened at Stonebridge the first time around, where the developers say, well, we're gonna make small ones, so I want 40 extra units in the redesign. It creates problems.
Well, and the PRD's got limits on it too,
Local,
right?
any adjacent neighborhood is, there's no easy answer.
If it was easy, we'd be done by now, but that's, but again,
I guess I
Commissioner, you
feel
put
more
your
comfortable if
finger, you
it
put your
said
finger right on the question.
All area, applies to all areas and not singling out just a couple areas.
This gets into the idea of where is it better, where are you more comfortable in certain locations?
Right.
Like the
Yeah, we've
village
left
owns
out-
10 acres adjacent to Java, is that better than?
We've left out Sure Acres, but we put Crabtree Farm, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the only thing, since we're done with our list, is I really think we need a strong statement about tree preservation and protect it. We don't mention specifically the word trees. We have one word on forests, but I'm a big believer that, you know, if we had more money, we need to spend more money on hiring experts to find ways to save our mature trees. And I know there's other people that are very passionate about planting more trees in all of our parkways, and we have lots to talk about wetlands in this document, but we don't have any goals about trees right now in this.
Great ad, thank you.
So I don't know what the language is, but I hope it's a strong one, would be my thought, because the village is all about our mature trees and trees in general.
Okay, excellent. Anybody else, anything that was missed in here or not conveyed thoroughly? Housing does not have a lot of items, but it's a big deal. Some of this maybe will be informed by the discussion you're going to have at the meeting about missing middle, which we also took into account when we put this together. Clearly, the first one is all about that.
Would this be a
Maybe we
good,
should skip housing until after we have the
Well, I was going to ask that.
work better. Wait till we have our missile meeting.
That's what I'm thinking. I
Middle
think-
discussion and then come back and see how these statements work.
And have
Good
the
idea.
rest of the group maybe.
yeah, we don't want to intrude on your time, Michael, but it might be a good time to break.
Oh, I'm sorry, were you talking about?
We might be at a good breaking point with housing.
Well, and again, I would agree with the idea about holding off the discussion on missing middle housing.
Right.
Or housing generally. You know, if you wanted to cover the couple of points here on, well, we've got land use and transportation left. I know the hour is late, but if you wanted to break, we could do it another time, or press on, we could be done. We'll revise this and get it back to you.
Well, let's do,
I know the attorney bragged about being able to stay till 2:30 in the morning and then left, but
We
I know, I'm just trying to lighten the mood, for God's sakes. So, Mr. Chair, are we up for pressing through with the ones that are left?
Do land use?
I'll yield to the two of you, whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
I'm fine, you know, we can do, land use maybe ties in with, well, or maybe that's only two things.
Why don't we just say, 1 and 2, and then 1 through 11? And let's generalize. If we can all pick out anything that we see as something that we need to talk about.
Is that a motion?
I have a motion to keep going if we could just generalize as we move forward.
I'm glad to treat these as topics. So there's two things up here about land use. One talks about removing, about the zoning ordinance, taking a look and modernizing it, which is something that we talk about in a lot of codes, and is something that we've talked about already, quite honestly. So that one is pretty straightforward. The other one about form-based codes is a form of zoning that might be appropriate for the downtown, and what it does is it's a type of zoning that is more focused on preserving the existing character. This is probably the most specific preserve existing character thing in here. So that would be my intro to these two, and if there's any comments, questions, or suggestions, we can do 1 and 2 together.
Well, I would prefer that number 2 just have the central business district and not East Lake Bluff. If we're going to have East Lake Bluff, then we should list all the residential areas. In my opinion.
I agree.
Okay, we're going to take out East Lake Bluff and make that be about the CBD the way it's meant to be. Again, we tried to be a little broad in some of these, but I agree. We'll take out East Lake Bluff. Good one. Anything else on land use? So transportation, and again, not trying to shortchange any of these, but are there, it says trails and sidewalks in here a lot. And I realize I put the graphic of the car on the page that says trail 10 times. But that aside, are there items through these first 5 to kind of group them, per Commissioner Daley's suggestion, that should be revised, removed, or where the geographies should be tweaked?
Well, number 8, I thought was a done item. Work with IDOT to facilitate improvements to the 41-176 interchange. The design has been stamped, it's underway, isn't it? It sounds like it's an old goal that got carried forward, and it's done now. It's not built, but it's.
The phase 1 is complete. There are minor details, like the village want to add brick, or granite boulders to the park, to the center boulevard, in certain areas, that kind of, or more lighting, those types of little final nuances, but that's generally your right plan is done.
Yeah, because this says for road safety and access are the issues listed specifically here, so, or somehow we should. But I guess we can leave it. And other aesthetic improvements.
Yeah, I was just trying to think how to say that, and aesthetic improvements, thank
And then
you.
number 1, where we talk about continuing to expand trails and sidewalks, it's one of these things where we've listed some of the geographical areas, but it seems to me that's a goal that is worthy everywhere to consider.
I would agree with that, especially because this one specifically talks about trip generators, so I think that having it be applicable across the village is a sound approach. So I'll make that one all geographies, if that's all right with everybody.
Yes.
Are there other on these transportation that,
We talked about the sidewalk issue generally, I think, last time around, didn't we, George? And one of the concerns was it's got to be very, very site-specific, right?
you talk about number 3?
Yeah, number 3.
Well, I know the old location, when the existing plan goes to the pain of listing out every
This one
location
will,
where.
This one will, right, close the gap, there's the gaps. We put in for a grant but there's others, we talked about Moffett Road, right, from East Blodgett to just north, I think is where the turn is.
Right.
There's nothing there. But there's plenty of areas like that that we would say, here's the list. And some of these are higher priority than others because of the routes to school, et cetera, et cetera. But you will have that.
Okay, so you're going to drop that.
And I think what we'll do with the language here is to do exactly what Drew is saying, is to add the notion of the gaps, rather than just sort of generically talking about sidewalks.
Oh, you've got, oh. Okay.
I mean, that was the intent of strategic locations, but I guess it's a little vague, and mentioning the gaps is a better approach.
Well, and we, you know, in terms of, it's so expensive to do this now, but like we asked for, what was the max on that Safe Routes to School grant? It was like 50 or 100, it's got 100,000. It's 100.
100 or 200, yeah, max.
It's like, it's gone so fast, but we identified, we worked with the school district to say, okay, where do you think we should put them to get kids to these places, and we came up with this plan. But it's shocking how one doesn't go very far. It's like there's only like 4 or 5 routes to close those gaps. And it's like, there's plenty more gaps out there that we're aware of. Or, you know, think of a East Terrace with sidewalks just in mid-block, you know, for no reason.
Number 4, now that I look at it in light of doing this whole thing, is a little bit redundant to one that we talked about. But number 4 is a little redundant to something we talked about before, but. So I
Number 6, we just called out 3 locations, and once again, Crabtree was one of them, and
Right.
there's other potential estates that can be broken up, so either put all residential geographies.
is that good with the group? I think that's a good edit. Cool.
Should we have all for number 3? We've got virtually all.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think if we're using that nomenclature, I think that's a good spot for it. Thank you. Anything else 1 through 11 based on your notes?
real picky, I know it's late, we got 6 minutes.
No,
to
it's
go.
fine.
On number 7, consider regulations to govern safe use of electric bike and scooter speeds on trails. I'd suggest we get rid of the word speeds,
Oh, good
because
one.
we may actually decide that at some point, electric bikes don't belong there. And
That's
this
not
sounds
picky,
like
that's
they're
pretty good. I like that.
About developing the right speed to allow them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and
You can go, that way it leaves us open to,
then speed could be part of it, but not the whole thing.
Would you want to expand that too, to not just say trails, but, you know, sidewalks? that are
Sidewalks, yeah.
just
Even
as-
the roads.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, those are good changes, thank you. I mean, speed was the thing that we heard repeatedly from the community, but I like taking it out. Not picky, that's a good one. And again, I'm not going through one by one, but if there are other things on transportation.
Well, I'm not sure if you're all the way to 11 yet, but I just had a couple other potential sites or whatever, like maybe mentioning a potential underpass between the West Terrace and the school area at 176 in Green Bay. We explored that years ago, having a tunnel under 176. I think it was,
Talking about the not yet Memorial George Russell at grade crossing at Blodgett.
yeah, Drew, I'm surprised you didn't sneak in that connection of Blodgett, West Blodgett between Sheridan and Green Bay.
If there are specific areas, I wouldn't,
Badger's still alive, so,
if there are specific areas, sorry.
sorry.
If there are specific areas, I wouldn't necessarily list them in here, but if you want to, the couple that you've mentioned, I've noted, and as we get to the further recommendations, those are the ones we'll list specifically.
yeah, that'd be great. And we also talked about maybe a pedestrian overpass in a couple sites. I mean, that's been raised by,
It's it's been taught, there used to be one like crossing, you know, what was it Sheridan Road to go, I mean, those were in the 97 plan. Just now, it just seems like this, where did you have to start that to make it meet ADA and all that?
Yeah, I was going to say ADA has changed the feasibility of those things.
And so now, the Western Springs, which is a western suburb next to Hinsdale, they have subterranean crossings below, you know, just pop onto the train tracks, and they're really very nice. They're in the downtown, that's what we actually talked about at Logic, having a headway through there.
Right.
The county is doing that on some of their roads and bike trails too. There's one on Deerfield Road by the interstate where they've actually gone under the interstate to connect the two sides rather than go over or put people on the roadway going over the interstate. So the underpass is getting to be the best practice. Of course, you've already had it here, but.
Yeah, like Logic is people from Tangley and, you know, North Terrace, they can get a quick cut into.
Yeah, gosh.
So we'll leave this more generally in here, but we'll be prepared in the plan to note the places that it's the sort of thing that the village should work with partners to get grants and other people's money to do that, because those are expensive.
And then I had scratched down one other goal.
What?
I don't know how the members feel about it, about pursuing with IDOT the reduction of the speed limit on Sheridan Road between the south limit of the middle school and the East Blodgett Avenue, you know, the whole downtown area. It's probably not going to get it accomplished, but I still think traffic moves much too quickly
Oh, I agree.
with all the people and kids that cross over to the train station and to get on that bike trail through those areas and the school crossings in there.
We know the process to get the state that we're actually having them look at right now, right by the elementary school on Greenway Road, to reconsider the speed limit through there again.
That would be wonderful,
So,
that too.
So it's,
Yeah.
we know who to ask and how to ask now. That's,
So both locations. I'd agree.
Yeah, that flashing pedestrian light's nice by the
Yeah, it
train
helps.
station, but,
But cars still come around that curve.
oh, yeah.
It's a scary location.
Okay. Other transportation additions, subtractions, edits. Again, not the last chance to look at it.
Feasibility of a potential park in the West Terrace. It's not under transportation, but
Was this one that was in here? Are you talking about an additional one?
Under environment?
it may be being under environment or, we don't have to work through it tonight, but
Is the idea to add that in?
yeah, just as a,
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch it, though.
Neighborhood park in the West Terrace area.
whatever the planning standard is, walkability for neighborhood parks, their closest is actually between the passive recreation to the west and the forest reserve lands. You have to go further east to Malden Park is the most active recreation parks in close proximity.
Okay, cool. Other additions, changes, again, not the last chance, and there are others that'll look at it, but I do so appreciate your time and energy in workshopping and would echo what Commissioner Russell said about the hours that go into this, and I appreciate everybody's time.
well, we appreciate all your hard work, Michael and the team. And we weren't being critical, we just had the opportunity to have a dialogue.
That's the
so it worked
purpose
out
of that.
well.
I really appreciate everybody's feedback. I don't take it as anything else.
No.
And I personally wouldn't be opposed if we have other sections of the plan that are of this nature where we're going through list of recommendations, that we have a separate meeting, a second meeting during the month.
I agree.
Just-
That'd be a
It's,
good idea.
so we start fresh. I know you probably only had so many meetings with the village in your contract, but
Yes.
that's not
but-
our board's worry.
Yes, but this is productive time, so.
It just seems to me it would be the best thing, rather than, unless there are minor other items on the agenda, but if it's
It's just
a
gonna get
bigger
more
item.
specific from here on out, right?
Right, and-
More hand wringing,
More thoughtful dialogue?
yes.
I would tell you that we've built in some of that, so that as we take these to more detailed recommendations, there's a workshop with this group to do exactly what you're talking about. That might be 2 meetings instead of the one that's budgeted, but the time is productive, and we'll look at how to work that in.
Great. No, I think highly productive, so we really appreciate it, Michael.
Thank you for your time
Thanks.
Thank you.
and your insight. That was great.
Agenda item number 7, staff report.
Yeah, so just a quick update, just a reminder, as everyone knows, the March 7th special meeting will take place for the draft missing middle housing report, and that meeting will start at 6 PM.
6 PM. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Agenda item number 8, commissioners report. How's the agenda look for March?
There are 2 potential public hearings in the works, so
Thanks, Michael.
we will see.
Okay.
I have one question. I think is it the Architectural Board of Review or the Sustainability Committee that is evaluating the tree list and the tree ordinance and coming up with new categories? Like, is that something they're still working with?
So, that was initially looked at the SEC as part of, actually, the text amendments that were brought today. It was something that they had said that they wanted to look at, and since we were doing that already, was the tree list. That has kind of been paused to focus on some other items as of right now, but, there were some initial recommendations that staff put together, and the SEC wanted to kind of look further at them.
Okay. I had one specific concern, the Norway maples, right now, if a resident takes one down of a certain size, they get charged. And I know we let the Lobola take bunches of them down at no charge, so there seems to be Norway maples is still in a classification where I think everyone's arguing we shouldn't have them. Almost should consider them a weed tree, but yet there's a disconnect between waiving all the fees if Lobola's doing it and then charging a resident if they have a Norway they want to get rid of. So anyway, that shouldn't be considered separately,
I'm
but.
not aware that that's happening, but if you probably know the specific situation if you're saying it, so I'll talk to Jake about that.
Okay.
But can we bring it up, like, weren't we going to talk about the tree ordinance in this committee and revise it sooner than later?
So.
Or evaluate it, or whatever we were going to do?
I know one thing
To be
that
upgraded.
has been brought up is the heritage tree. Again, that's something that the SEC has asked to look at, and then that would then come to you guys for kind
Okay.
of, after their initial recommendation. That is in the works as well.
It's coming.
Anything else from the commissioners? Anything else from the village? Well, a very productive evening.
Yes.
So, is there a motion, please?
Before you, going back to that informal hearing, first item discussed tonight, that, the pathway, there was an idea, do we want to see them? Does the PCZBA want to see them? Or do we want to create a text amendment that just gives it a clear path moving forward? And there's different levels of we want to see them. You could do it where the authority, you can ask the board to say, like you have authority within a certain degree of variations, you can say, we want to see them, but that's the only people who would see them, right? It wouldn't have to go to the board next, per se. I don't know if you had any thoughts about that approach, because I suspect we'll bring a cleanup to you all fairly soon, and there's a whole bunch of ways to do it. And, the idea, the text amendment, you can make it very specific, like we were talking about with Ben, saying it can be just Shore Acres, or it can be everywhere else. And I think my experience with this group, there'd be concerns about applicability, allowing something that we didn't think about, or we forgot about, maybe on one of those other side streets. So Anyway, just throw that out there as another option, rather than having to go through a full variation process per se, or maybe this could be the one stop.
Certainly willing to listen to any good ideas. It just seems to me the basic position is, it just doesn't make logical sense to not have something that's a private road that no doubt has an easement area down it. It's almost like a public right of way, but it's not. Why
Why would we make the
treat
distinction
it?
in the code? Yeah, I get it. I hear
However
you.
you think we can best attack that.
Yeah.
We'd be,
Okay.
Yep.
If that's the, I mean, that's easier.
All right. Agenda item number 9, adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll let Jill.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Accurate.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thanks for all your patience. Thanks
Thank
for your
you.
hard
Thank
work.
you, Gary.
Good meeting.
Thank you, Clara.
All right.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you, Lauren.
Cut later than I thought, Drew thought probably.
Yeah, that's okay.